Welcome, traveler. Thank you for joining me here in this quiet space. Tonight, there is no rush, no task waiting to be finished, no burden pressing down upon your shoulders. Only a story, told slowly, unfolding like a lantern's glow deep within a cavern. You are safe to rest, to drift in and out as your body allows. You might listen closely to every word, or you may let them fade into the background, carrying you softly toward sleep. Either way, the journey will wait for you, steady and unhurried. And before we begin, a small whisper of gratitude. If you'd like these gentle explorations to continue, consider subscribing. No pressure, only if it feels right. Now, let us settle in. Feel the weight of the day ease away, as though you were setting down a heavy pack at the entrance to a cave. Imagine your breathing slowing, matching the rhythm of dripping water in a hidden chamber. Each breath is a step downward, deeper into stillness, deeper into the earth's embrace. The world outside can fade now. All that matters is this quiet question, carried like an ember in the dark. What if Earth's very first civilization lived not on its surface, but far beneath it? At first, the thought may feel strange, even impossible. We are used to imagining civilizations rising above the ground, building towers that stretch toward the sky, leaving ruins that crumble beneath the open sun. But what if the story of beginnings was written downward instead of upward? What if, long before the pyramids, long before the stones of Mesopotamia, there were people, or beings of some kind, who carved their lives into hidden walls, who lived where sunlight never reached? And, to invert the thought, what if there was never such a civilization at all? What if the Earth has always been silent of that kind of secret? Perhaps caves are only what we see today, hollows left by water and fire, not by hands or voices. Perhaps the idea is only a dream, a human tendency to fill the silence with stories. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it never could be. To ask this question is to step into deep time, into the vast library of the earth, where each layer of stone is like a page pressed with faint memories. Time is the editor, patient and ruthless. It keeps some words, erases others, and scatters whole chapters into dust. Civilizations, if they were ever hidden below, may have been rewritten 1,000 times by floods, by shifting plates, by collapses of stone. Yet even in absence, there can be traces. A soot mark, a carved line, a fragment of metal. Faint whispers that something once was. The earth has always been our companion. It has cradled us, fed us, sheltered us, but it has also hidden more than it has revealed. Most of its history is still buried, tucked away beneath the shifting crust, beyond the reach of our tools. Oceans have risen and retreated. Mountains have been lifted skyward only to be worn down to sand. Whole forests once stretched where deserts now lie. And always, beneath it all, the underground waits, silent and dark, keeping its secrets. Perhaps among those secrets lies a story we have never been taught to look for. Think for a moment about how much of human culture is already tied to the underground. Myths speak of underworlds, not only as places of death, but as wombs of rebirth, as shelters, as hidden kingdoms. Some cultures tell of ancestors emerging from caves to begin life on the surface. Others whisper of whole peoples who retreated below, away from storms or stars. Why does this theme return again and again across time and continents? Is it only metaphor? Or is there an echo of something more? The possibility does not demand certainty. It only invites curiosity. It says, imagine for a moment that our planet once cradled not just animals and plants, but also a civilization that chose to dwell where no sun could reach. How might they have lived? What signs could they have left? And why would their story be so easily lost? As these questions rest in your mind, allow them to drift like leaves on a slow river. You need not answer them tonight. You need only to let them exist side by side with the rhythm of your breath. This is not a tale of urgency. It is a tale of patience, of exploration, of possibilities that stretch like caverns into the dark. Earth, after all, has been writing for billions of years. It writes with lava flows and with riverbeds. It writes with fossils pressed like pressed flowers in stone. It writes with silence, too, with blank pages where nothing remains. Perhaps in those blank pages lies the memory of a hidden people. Perhaps not, but to wonder is to listen closely, to place your ear to the wall of time and hear the faintest hum of what might have been. You are not alone in this wondering. Across the world, people have stood at cave mouths and felt that same quiet pull, that same sense of mystery. They have stepped into the cool air of caverns, felt the darkness close around them, and asked what secrets might lie ahead. In some places, paintings remain on those walls, images of animals, of hunts, of spirits. These are our ancestors' gifts to us, their way of saying, "We were here." But what if, far deeper, beyond where our ancestors dared to go, there were other markings, other signs, now erased by time? It is this balance of possibility and silence that draws us onward. Perhaps there was nothing. Perhaps there was everything. The truth may be forever beyond our reach. Yet in asking, we come to see our own fragility more clearly, and we find comfort in knowing that even if civilizations vanish, the earth remains vast, patient, and enduring. So tonight, as you rest, allow this thought to guide you gently inward. A civilization beneath our feet, or perhaps only a dream. Either way, it is a story that soothes and stirs the imagination. And if your mind begins to wander, let it. If sleep begins to arrive, welcome it. This story will carry on without needing to be finished, because its true purpose is not an answer, but a calm space for you to rest within. Now, let us step softly downward into the first wondering. There is a question that arrives softly, like a candle flickering in a darkened hall. It does not demand an answer, nor does it insist on urgency. It only waits, patient and luminous, in the corners of the mind. The question is this: what if the very first civilization on Earth, the first great unfolding of culture and knowledge, did not rise beneath open skies at all, but was hidden beneath the ground? It is a thought both fragile and vast. Fragile, because it may not be true, may never have been true. Vast, because to imagine it stretches the mind far beyond the known record, into a realm where memory and possibility blur together. And yet we return to it again and again. Why? Because there is something in us that longs for the hidden, that aches for the possibility that stories still sleep beneath our feet. Curiosity has always been a gentle light in the dark. It illuminates, but softly, never all at once. It moves like the glow of a lantern carried through a cave, brushing light onto one wall, then another, never revealing the whole shape, but enough to guide the next step. That is how this wondering feels. A light not of certainty, but of invitation. Across cultures, across millennia, human beings have told stories of worlds below. Myths coil downward like roots, reaching into darkness and finding life there. The Greeks imagined Hades, a kingdom under the earth where countless souls drifted, their stories not ended, but transformed. The Maya spoke of Xibalba, a place of trials and shadows where the underworld itself tested the spirit. In Norse tales, dwarves and dark elves shaped metal in caverns, their forges hidden from the sun. In the Middle East, travelers whispered of buried cities, entire realms swallowed by sand, waiting under the weight of centuries. Even outside of myth, the earth is honeycombed with human memory. Catacombs stretch silently beneath Rome and Paris. Vast chambers filled with echoes of lives gone by. In Turkey, the underground city of Derinkuyu lies carved with extraordinary precision, large enough to shelter thousands. In China, caves have been used for homes, temples, and tombs, their walls still holding the marks of hands long vanished. When we bend low and walk these passages, we are reminded that the underground is not empty. It is filled with presence, with silence, with possibility. Perhaps our fascination comes from nature itself. For animals, the soil is safety. The fox retreats to her den, the rabbit to his warren. The bear curls in hibernation through the long winter. To live underground is to be shielded, to be hidden, to survive. Plants too write their secret lives into the dirt. Every tree sends its roots deep. Every vine extends unseen tendrils. Every blade of grass holds half its body beneath the surface. Life knows how to trust the dark, how to place its most precious parts where they cannot be seen. And humans are not separate from this rhythm. We found our earliest shelters in caves, their walls warm with firelight and our first painted dreams. We carved our homes into rock faces, built tombs that tunneled into stone, raised entire sanctuaries in places where sunlight never touched. Even today, we seek the underground when we need coolness, or secrecy, or quiet. The earth folds around us like a blanket, muffling the noise of the world above. So perhaps it is not so strange to imagine that the first civilization could have chosen the same. Perhaps, when the earth was young in human time, the greatest effort of culture and knowledge happened in places we do not see. Perhaps the first cities were never cities at all, but labyrinths of passageways, chambers carved like cathedrals, communities moving like rivers through stone corridors. If so, what traces would remain? Would their walls still echo faintly, mistaken now for natural caves? Would their tools lie buried in stone, pressed under miles of layered history? Or would the very safety of the underground ensure that no sign survived? The evidence folded away so neatly that nothing remains to tell us it was ever there. On the surface, time leaves ruins, crumbled temples, fragments of pottery, inscriptions worn but still legible. But the underground remembers differently. It conceals as much as it preserves. It holds secrets tightly, compressing them into silence. Perhaps an entire people could have risen, flourished, and vanished, leaving nothing but the faint suggestion of possibility. And yet, perhaps not. Perhaps no such civilization ever lived beneath the earth. Perhaps the reason we imagine it has little to do with the past, and everything to do with ourselves. We imagine it because mystery comforts us, because to dream of hidden worlds is to believe that Earth has not given away all her secrets, that there are still chambers of wonder unlit, still tunnels leading elsewhere. Maybe the first civilization never lived underground. Maybe there is nothing to find, but still we imagine. We imagine because the act of wondering is itself a kind of discovery. It reveals not the truth of the past, but the shape of our longing. It shows us the places where we hope to find something more. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it never could be. But the imagining itself is a kind of treasure. A lantern lit in the dark, guiding us deeper, not toward an answer, but toward another question. If such a people ever existed, the earth would hold their memory. And if not, the earth still holds all the rest. Every layer of stone, every ripple in the rock, every fossil pressed into silence. Each is a page in a book that remembers. To follow this wondering further, we must learn to read that book. We must learn how Earth keeps its archive, how it preserves traces of life, how it decides what is forgotten and what endures. And so, softly, the wondering leads us onward. To ask whether an underground civilization might have lived, we must first ask how Earth remembers it all. Beneath our feet, the ground is not silent. It is not empty. It is a vast, unbroken record, though one written in a language so slow, so subtle, that only patience can reveal its meaning. Imagine the Earth as a library, not of paper, not of ink, but of stone. Its shelves stretch downward instead of upward, its archives pressed into layers rather than bound into volumes, and every stratum, every seam of sediment is a page where time has set down its impressions. To walk across a landscape is to wander through the aisles of this library. Though most of its books remain closed to us, we see only the surface, grass, sand, the thin scatter of soil. But below lie shelves upon shelves, each telling a story of a world that once was. The sandstone remembers rivers, the limestone recalls oceans, the coal seams hold forests that grew thick in prehistoric air. Each is a fragment of memory, a diary entry of the planet itself. And yet, as with all diaries, there are gaps. Some pages are torn, others smudged or erased. Whole chapters collapse, lost to erosion, shifted by earthquakes, consumed by fire, or buried too deep for us to ever reach. In this library of stone, absence is as telling as presence. The missing words remind us that time is not an orderly librarian. It is a restless editor, one that preserves some passages while striking through others without warning. Think of sediment layers as shelves arranged in order. At the top, the present, thin and fragile, like a recently placed book. Beneath, thicker layers pressed with weight, older, denser, harder to disturb. Fossils are like pressed flowers tucked between the pages, reminders of what once bloomed, once walked, once swam. They are delicate, improbable, often partial. A tooth, a shell, a single bone fragment. These survive not because they were chosen, but because chance allowed them to resist decay long enough to be sealed away. Most of life, of course, does not make it into the library at all. Soft tissues dissolve, wood crumbles, cloth, skin, breath, laughter. These vanish before they can be recorded. Even whole civilizations, if they are unlucky, can disappear without leaving more than the faintest mark. We imagine stone as eternal, but even stone is worn down, dissolved, recycled into other stone. Time is patient, and patience is erasure. This is why the idea of an underground civilization is so slippery. For anything to be remembered in the geologic archive, conditions must be almost impossibly precise. The remains must be buried quickly, sealed from air, shielded from water that corrodes or organisms that feast. They must endure pressure without being crushed, endure chemical change without being erased. To live underground is to live close to this process of rewriting. Tunnels collapse, chambers fill, walls dissolve. What is built in secret may remain secret, not because it was never real, but because the earth is efficient at hiding its own scars. And yet, traces do survive, though rarely in the form one might expect. The absence of something where it should be can be as telling as the presence of something where it shouldn't. A sudden break in layers, a pattern in stone that whispers of intervention, a hollow where no hollow should exist. In this way, even silence in the record is a kind of evidence. It suggests a story cut short, a chapter withheld, a gap we cannot yet explain. Geologists learn to read these absences as carefully as they read the lines that remain. A missing span of rock may mark an era when mountains rose and stripped the surface clean. A fault line may testify to violence, not by human hands, but by the shifting of the earth itself. The gaps themselves are pages too, blank, but still part of the book. So we stand before the library of stone, thumbing gently through its shelves, aware that much has been lost. What we see is extraordinary. Dinosaurs preserved mid-motion, forests pressed flat, shells gleaming like stars. But what we do not see may be just as vast. There is no guarantee that everything significant leaves a trace. Indeed, the record is defined more by erasure than preservation. For every fossil that survives, countless lives are gone without a word. For every city we find, many more may have vanished, folded back into silence. And so the question becomes not only, what does the earth remember? But also, what does it choose to forget? Or rather, what does time allow us to see, and what does it consign to depths we cannot reach? Perhaps somewhere, miles beneath the surface, there lies a shelf in this library that has never been opened, a layer pressed with marks not made by rivers or wind, but by hands, by tools, by lives lived in darkness. Perhaps those pages exist, waiting, or perhaps they never were. Perhaps the library holds no such chapter, and our wondering is only that, a wondering lit softly like a lantern carried through a cavern. Still, the metaphor comforts. To imagine the earth as a library is to trust that even in silence, there is memory. Even in stone, there is a kind of listening. What has been lost may still echo, faintly, in ways we do not yet understand. And so we ask, if there were dwellers in the dark, if the first civilization truly lived underground, how could we even know? In nearly every corner of the world, humanity has whispered of lives beneath the earth. The stories arrive in different tongues, colored by different landscapes, but their rhythms echo each other with uncanny resonance. It is as though across cultures, across time, people felt a pull toward the idea of hidden worlds, shadowed realms beneath the soil. And in these tales, one finds not only fear, but fascination, reverence, and even belonging. In ancient Greece, the underworld was not merely a place of punishment. It was also a realm of continuity, where existence shifted but did not vanish. Hades ruled not as a tyrant, but as a keeper, holding countless souls in silence. Rivers flowed through his domain, the Styx, the Lethe, the Acheron, each with meaning, each with a role in shaping the lives of those who passed. For the Greeks, to speak of the underworld was to acknowledge that beneath every field, beneath every mountain, there was a mirror world of presence, unseen but near. In Hindu traditions, another vision unfolds. Here dwell the Nagas, serpent beings, wise and powerful, inhabiting splendid palaces deep within the earth. Their homes are described as luminous, adorned with jewels and treasures, safe from the burning sun above. The Nagas are not always benevolent, but neither are they wholly feared. They embody mystery, guardianship, and a reminder that the subterranean can be as rich and vibrant as the world above. Native American stories, too, carry this motif. In many traditions, the first people are said to have emerged from beneath the ground, climbing upward from caverns into the light of the surface. For the Hopi, emergence is not only a story of origins, but a cycle, with each world unfolding from another, the underground as both womb and memory. These tales remind us that the surface is not the beginning, but a continuation of something older, hidden in the dark. Caves themselves often serve as metaphors in myth. They are wombs of stone, places of gestation, of shelter, of rebirth. Within them, one finds warmth and silence, protection from storms, and the echo of the eternal. To descend into a cave is to return, in some sense, to the safety before birth, where the world above has not yet demanded its light or its noise. It is no wonder that across ages, humans painted their first dreams on cave walls, as though confiding secrets to the earth itself. The myths linger because they speak to something more than geography. They reflect our awareness that the underground is not void but presence, not absence but possibility. They turn caves and tunnels into symbols of memory, resilience, and refuge. In these stories, the earth is not only a surface to be walked upon, but a layered realm, filled with lives and lessons. And perhaps these myths do more than symbolize. Perhaps they carry echoes of memory, faint as whispers passed from one generation to the next. It may be only imagination, only the universal human impulse to dream of what lies out of sight. Or it may be something more, a faint cultural recollection of encounters we can no longer prove. We cannot say, but listen to the rhythm. Myths across continents tell of beings below. Greeks with their shadowed kingdoms, Hindus with their jeweled nagas, native peoples with their emergent stories. These parallels tempt us to wonder, why so often? Why so similar? Is it mere coincidence? Or is the earth itself inspiring the same visions wherever humans settle upon its crust? The cautious answer is that myths are metaphors, nothing more. They are ways of making sense of death, of origins, of the fear and awe that comes with stepping into a cavern's darkness. But another answer, softer, more daring, lingers at the edge of thought. Perhaps myths are not only symbols. Perhaps they are faint reflections of lives lived underground long ago. If so, the stories are like shadows on a cave wall, suggestions of something real, though distorted, distant, blurred by time. They do not prove, but they hint. They do not declare, but they invite. They remain across millennia, persistent in their telling, as though unwilling to vanish. Still, we must remember, stories alone cannot prove. They can guide, they can inspire, they can open doors in the imagination, but they cannot provide the weight of evidence, the solidity of stone. And so, if we are to follow this wondering further, we must turn from myth to matter. We must place our hands on the earth itself and ask what it remembers beyond stories. Because in the end, for all their beauty and resonance, myths are voices carried on air. To search for truth, we must kneel and listen to the ground. But stories alone cannot prove. We must look to the ground itself. The path bends softly now. We have lingered among myths, among stories and shadows. But the time comes to step more carefully, to let imagination place its foot on stone. Picture yourself at the mouth of a cave. The air is cooler here, damp with the memory of rains long past. Behind you, the surface still glimmers with sky, but ahead lies a dimness that seems to breathe. You carry no hurry with you. This is not a descent of fear, but of curiosity, of gentleness. Each step echoes softly, and the sound lingers like a reminder that you are never truly alone in the dark. To wonder about a civilization underground is to cross a threshold, from the familiar into the hidden. On the surface, the evidence of humanity is plain. Cities, ruins, bones, tools. But beneath the earth, shadows, silence, and stone. And so the mind asks, if there were lives once lived here, how could they have remained unseen? How would we even begin to know? The cave invites us deeper. The walls shimmer faintly where water once dripped, leaving mineral traces like the strokes of a slow, patient painter. The ground beneath feels solid, yet alive with unseen histories. As you walk, you may imagine the distant flicker of torches, the hushed murmur of voices long gone. They are not here, and yet your mind paints them anyway. This is the threshold between story and science. For myths can inspire, but they cannot answer. The task ahead will be to ask, how could an underground civilization truly exist? What would they eat? How would they breathe? What fires or energies would keep them warm in the stone's embrace? These are questions of geology, of biology, of survival itself. But not all questions must be answered tonight. The descent is gentle, the stones patient. You may pause here at the edge of the cavern, feeling the earth's cool breath on your skin, and allow your mind to rest. For the story will wait. It will not vanish if your eyes grow heavy. It will still be here, deep beneath the soil of thought, ready to be uncovered when you return. And so, the invitation is given. Step downward with us, not in haste, but in wonder. The ground may yet hold its secrets. The darkness may yet teach us light. Carrying that thought onward, the mind turns from myth and quiet speculation toward the actual body of the earth, as though peeling back its outer skin. Beneath our feet lies not just a solid crust of rock, but a hidden architecture of chambers and corridors, spaces carved over millions of years by water, fire, and slow movements of stone. The underground world is not uniform, not simply dark and airless. It is a realm of variety, of winding tunnels and soaring caverns, of deep silence and dripping echoes. To imagine life dwelling below, we must first wander through this natural architecture, seeing what the earth itself provides as shelter. Consider the karst landscapes, those wide, porous regions of limestone riddled with sinkholes and caves. Rainwater, slightly acidic, seeps through cracks in the rock, dissolving its passage slowly, grain by grain. Over time, the small channels widen into tunnels, and tunnels into caverns. The result is a hidden continent beneath the soil, a labyrinth of chambers that can stretch for hundreds of miles. In some regions, entire rivers vanish into the ground, flowing unseen until they re-emerge far downstream. To walk within such a place is to feel suspended between two worlds, the familiar one above and a subterranean twin that hums quietly in shadow. Elsewhere, fire has written its signature below the crust. Lava tubes, born from volcanic eruptions, form when molten rivers cool on the outside while the interior continues to flow. Once the liquid stone drains away, it leaves behind hollow corridors, sometimes wide enough to hold cathedrals, sometimes stretching for dozens of miles. These tubes exist not only on Earth, but have been mapped on the Moon and Mars too, preserved in lower gravity and thinner atmospheres. Astronomers speculate that future explorers may find shelter there, hidden from radiation and surface storms. It is an echo of possibility. If such spaces exist beyond Earth, then why not imagine them as havens on our own planet long before human memory began? Even deeper lie aquifers, the veins and arteries of underground water. These do not form open caverns in the same way as karst systems, but they permeate the bedrock, saturating porous stone, filling fractures, moving silently through gravel and sand. To creatures adapted to the dark, these aquifers are both habitat and highway. Blind fish, translucent shrimp, tiny worms with no need for eyes, all drift through the currents of these hidden rivers. The presence of such life reminds us that existence below is not only possible but already underway, even if we rarely notice. Still further into the stone, where no flowing river carves a path and no cavern has been hollowed wide, there exists what scientists call the deep biosphere. Here, in cracks of rock kilometers below the surface, microbes cling to life. They feed not on sunlight, but on chemical reactions with minerals. eking out survival where pressure is immense and warmth comes not from the sun, but from the Earth's inner heat. Some of these microbes may divide only once in 100 years. Their pace of life measured not in breaths, but in epochs. And yet, they endure. Their presence whispers a strange reassurance. The dark is not empty. Among these varied underground forms, the imagination lingers on the idea of vast chambers, the ones grand enough to hold entire cities, if only walls could be shored up and air refreshed. There are caverns that stretch wider than football fields, taller than cathedrals, deeper than skyscrapers are tall. In New Mexico, the Carlsbad Caverns open into a hall so immense it feels like a hollow mountain. In Vietnam, Son Doong Cave contains forests beneath its collapsed ceilings, places where sunbeams pour through, allowing jungles to thrive unseen by the wider world. To stand in such a chamber is to feel very small, as though the earth herself has made room for dreams. It is not difficult, then, to imagine ancient people, pressed by hunger or fear, wandering into such openings. Perhaps they sought shelter from storms or beasts, or simply followed curiosity downward. They may have lit torches, listened to the dripping water, and felt the enclosing walls as both threat and comfort. For a moment, the idea of a life lived entirely underground does not seem so distant. The rooms exist, carved not by human hands, but by the patience of the planet. And yet, not all that is vast is hospitable. Many caves are choked with dangerous gases, or flooded by sudden rains, or too unstable to dwell in for long. Lava tubes may collapse, aquifers may drown. The deep biosphere is too small and harsh for human breath. But the presence of possibility is enough to hold the question open. The Earth does not lack for chambers. It does not lack for shadowed space. It offers, if not a clear home, at least the raw structure in which one could be built. If you picture yourself still wandering downward, it is not only darkness you encounter, but variety. Stone polished smooth by flowing water, walls glimmering with minerals, open voids where footsteps echo endlessly. These are not barren corridors, but canvases where life might adapt. Perhaps civilizations of the mind linger here, imagined or forgotten. Perhaps, like the blind fish, an older kind of being once learned to navigate by touch and sound alone. The thought is neither proven nor disproven. It rests quietly, like water pooled in a hidden chamber. And you, drifting now, may let your thoughts follow those caverns as though tracing a river's course. The earth, in its quiet patience, has already hollowed the possibilities. What rests upon them is still uncertain, but the room is there, waiting. Soon, another question will arrive. For if the spaces exist, if there is truly room for cities beneath the stone, then we must ask, how could such a world breathe? How could there be air? And what of light? Without these, walls and ceilings remain silent. With them, they might have carried voices. That is the thought that waits just ahead, patient in the dark. From here, the question deepens, as though following a tunnel further inward. If the caverns exist, if the earth has already carved the rooms, then what of the breath of life itself? Space alone is not enough. For any civilization to take root in darkness, the elements of survival must follow them down. Air to breathe, water to drink, fire or some other spark to keep the chill of stone at bay. Without these, the greatest chambers remain only silent monuments of geology. With them, they could become a cradle of hidden life. Water comes first to mind. On the surface, rivers sketch their paths across valleys and plains, but underground, they flow just as persistently. In karst landscapes, whole rivers vanish into limestone, reappearing miles away. Some never return, becoming subterranean streams that wind endlessly in the dark. Lakes collect in these low places, fed by rain that seeps slowly through porous rock. In Romania, the mobile cave has been sealed from the surface for millions of years, its lake and air untouched by sunlight. And yet life thrives within. Worms, spiders, microbes, each adapted to a closed world. Such places prove that water below is not a rarity, but a certainty. A patient sculptor carving passages, a reservoir that could sustain those who learned its patterns. Imagine an ancient people stumbling upon such an underground river, hearing it before they saw it, the sound echoing down stone corridors like a voice in the silence. They might dip their hands and drink, trusting the coolness, or follow the flow to a broader chamber where a hidden lake gleamed by torchlight. These were not dry tombs, but living waters, always moving, always carrying the memory of rain. Yet water alone cannot give breath. Air must circulate, or else the flame of every torch would die, and lungs would ache in suffocating stillness. Here, the earth provides in subtler ways. Rock is not entirely solid. It is threaded with cracks, fissures, and pores. Through them, gases can travel, slow drafts of wind drawn from one chamber to another, exhalations of the Earth's surface reaching down into her veins. In many caves, explorers speak of feeling breezes that seem to come from nowhere, cool streams of air threading through narrow gaps. Such drafts are more than curiosities. They are proof that even in darkness, a breath of sky may find its way below. Perhaps an underground people could have learned to recognize these breathing stones, dwelling where the rock exhaled most freely. They may have traced the faint winds to open fissures above, invisible skylights where air descended like an unseen blessing. Over time, the knowledge of such currents could have been cultivated as carefully as crops are tended. To survive in hidden halls, one must learn to listen to the Earth's own lungs, and then comes fire, or something in its place. Fire on the surface is simple. Wood, dried in the sun, burns with warmth and light. Underground, the challenge grows. Wood would be scarce unless carried down from above, and flames hunger for oxygen that caves supply only in whispers. Yet fire has always been humanity's most stubborn companion. Even in the dark, sparks can be coaxed from flint and steel, embers nursed with patience, and fuel carried in bundles on backs. One can imagine ancient dwellers storing torches, carrying charcoal, perhaps even cultivating mosses or fungi that burn slowly, stretching the meager gift of flame. But what if fire was not their only light? The underground world has its own lamps, woven not from smoke but from chemistry. Bioluminescence flickers in some of the deepest caverns where insects, fungi, or tiny creatures glow with a pale green or blue. To walk among them is to feel the cave itself has stars of its own, constellations pressed close to stone. For a hidden people, such light might not only guide but inspire. A reminder that the dark is not absolute, that even shadow has its lanterns. Beyond the living glow, chemical energy hums in the rock. In the deep biosphere, microbes survive without sun, drawing sustenance from minerals, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. These processes, though invisible, generate heat and sometimes pockets of natural gas that burn if sparked. One can imagine early humans stumbling upon a seep of flame that never dies, fed by underground gases, a torch the earth herself holds. Such places exist even now, rare shrines where the rock burns without human hand. For those who dreamed of building lives in darkness, these eternal fires may have been lighthouses in the stone. In this weaving of water, air, and fire, the possibility emerges. Not certainty, but plausibility. The essentials of life can be found below, though in strange and altered forms. Water drips steadily, cool and clean, from the ceiling of karst caves. Air drifts in unseen currents, moving where the rock allows. Fire glows in torches, in rare pockets of gas, in the soft bioluminescence of fungi. None of these are as abundant as on the surface, yet none are wholly absent either. It is enough to wonder whether resourcefulness could have bridged the gap, whether necessity might have coaxed invention earlier than we suppose. And you, drifting with these thoughts, may feel how each element threads into the next, like veins of ore running through stone, water pools where air moves, fire feeds where gases seep, light flickers where life adapts. It is not an easy world, but neither is it empty. The earth gives, in fragments, what might be needed. Soon, however, another question will rise. If water flows, if air circulates, if fire and glow can soften the dark, then what of the sun itself? For life as we know it is bound to its rhythm, to the slow rising and setting that governs time. Could a people below truly survive without that steady pulse of light? Or would they need to invent an imitation, an artificial dawn and dusk carved into their stone-bound days? Perhaps it could be done, but how would people survive without the sun? Carrying the thought forward, let us linger now with the question of light and heat, the subtle companions of survival. For if air can circulate and water can flow, then something more elusive remains: energy. No civilization, hidden or open to the sky, can persist without it. Energy is the pulse beneath all human stories, the unseen tide that powers flame, motion, and memory. Without it, the underground halls would stay silent, their shadows never stirred by work or song. On the surface, the sun has always been the master provider, gifting warmth and growth each morning. But beneath the stone, the sun is absent, and so life must borrow from other sources, drawing sparks where it can, coaxing fire from the earth's own reserves. One can imagine an underground people leaning first on what is most immediate: flame itself. Fire is more than heat. It is light, ritual, safety. Torches and hearths could burn where fuel was found, and the rock would echo with the crackle of flame. What fuels might they have discovered? Some caverns cut through veins of coal, black stone that itself is the compressed memory of ancient forests. Touch a spark to it, and it burns hot and long, a condensed echo of sunlight from 100 million years ago. Perhaps these hidden dwellers would have mined it gently, harvesting only enough to warm their halls, aware that the seams, though vast, were not infinite. Coal would be sunlight translated into stone, waiting to be released with a careful hand. Elsewhere, the earth carries peat, dense mats of plant matter preserved in damp soil, drying over centuries into a smoldering fuel. It is easier to ignite than coal, more perishable, but still a gift for those who needed warmth in shadow. In some stretches of land, natural gas seeps through the cracks, invisible until it meets flame, then flaring into steady fire. Such pockets can burn for decades, even centuries, sustained by deep geological processes. In a hidden cavern, one could imagine an eternal flame flickering at the heart of a settlement, tended but never extinguished, a constant companion as sure as the stars are above. But flame alone would not suffice for light. Torches fade, smoke gathers, fuel runs low. And so the underground world may have turned toward gentler luminescence, the soft and patient glow of life itself. Bioluminescent fungi bloom in caves even now, painting walls with faint green light, as though the stone itself were alive with embers. Tiny insects can shimmer in the dark, weaving constellations in miniature. These are not myths, but living realities. Nature's lampshades glowing where the sun never enters. It is tempting to imagine a people cultivating such organisms deliberately, tending glowing gardens in the dark. Fungal groves nurtured on damp logs, their radiance harnessed not for brightness, but for a diffuse, steady glow. Perhaps they might even have experimented in ways lost to us, with coaxing greater light, blending organisms, shaping habitats, creating a world where the walls themselves shimmer faintly, enough to guide a hand or mark a path. In this vision, the underground does not feel lifeless. It pulses with its own twilight, not day, not night, but something between. Beyond the fragile glow of biology, the Earth herself holds a deeper furnace, geothermal warmth. The ground is not uniformly cold. Heat seeps upward from the planet's molten heart, rising in hisses of steam, in hot springs and geysers, in stone warmed by the pressure of its own making. An underground society might have learned to seek these places, to dwell near the warmth, using it to heat chambers, to cook food, even to create a steady climate in the absence of sun. Unlike wood or coal, geothermal warmth does not diminish quickly. It is patient, eternal on human timescales, a quiet breath from the planet's own lungs. Picture them building around a vent where warm air rises, hollowing their dwellings in circles so the heat could flow through. Imagine stone pools filled with hot water, both practical and ritual, places of rest and healing. The Earth's warmth would have been their hearth, their hidden sun, unseen but ever present. And still, we cannot know. Maybe it was firelight alone, smoky and dim, keeping their shadows company. Maybe it was fungi, glowing faintly on damp walls, nurtured like crops. Maybe it was the deeper fire, geothermal and unyielding, that warmed their hidden lives. Or maybe it was all of these together, woven into a delicate balance, a tapestry of borrowed light and hidden fire. For you drifting now, the thought may ripple gently that what we call energy is simply the Earth's generosity, offered in many guises: sunlight above, coal compressed below, fungi glowing in silence, steam hissing from stone. Each is a reminder that the planet is never still, never inert, but always offering, if only we listen. Soon another question will rise, one that shifts from survival to possibility. For if space is carved by caverns, if water flows and air circulates, if energy can be borrowed from stone and flame, then what comes next? Survival might be enough for wanderers or small bands, but if an entire civilization sought to live in shadow, would these gifts suffice to build something lasting? Now, let us drift deeper into the vision, not only of survival, but of shaping, of dwelling, of making the darkness a place that feels like home. It is one thing to find a cavern and huddle within it, letting the stone itself be shelter. It is another to take chisel to wall, to carve, to smooth, to create patterns that whisper of intention. This is where imagination crosses from the accidental to the deliberate, where caves cease to be mere hollows and begin to resemble cities. The Earth provides halls vast enough to rival cathedrals. In karst landscapes, caverns open into chambers so wide that a traveler might walk for hours without touching every wall. Stalactites descend like frozen chandeliers, while stalagmites rise like silent guardians. To the hidden builders, such places might have been more than shelter. They could have been stages upon which the drama of life unfolded. Natural pillars would support roofs higher than any constructed dome, inviting people to gather, to speak, to sing. The acoustics of these halls might have amplified voices into song, creating an atmosphere not unlike the temples and theaters later raised beneath the sky. But natural chambers, however vast, rarely suffice forever. A growing community requires shaping. Imagine corridors carved into limestone, spiraling like roots through the bedrock. Rooms hollowed with patient hands, their walls smoothed with clay to hold back crumbling stone. Ventilation shafts chiseled upward, allowing breath to move, carrying smoke away, drawing fresh air downward like the lungs of a great subterranean beast. Such architecture would not rely on grandeur alone, but on balance, on the constant negotiation between safety and collapse. Clay, abundant in underground layers, could have been molded into bricks, hardened by fire, and stacked into arches that reinforced fragile ceilings. Stone pillars might have been left deliberately in place, not removed but shaped into columns. The underground city would grow like a coral reef, each dwelling added upon the other, each chamber adapting to the curves of the rock, a harmony between natural form and human will. In darkness, space would feel different, not wide horizons, but intimate enclosures, places of resonance where every step was felt and every voice carried. And fire, the same fire that gave warmth and light, would also unlock metal. If seams of copper or iron ran through their stone world, they might have been discovered by accident, veins gleaming faintly when struck by torchlight. Fire could coax those metals free, smelting them into tools, ornaments, perhaps even structural supports. Imagine a wall studded with copper plates, both practical and decorative, gleaming faintly in flickering torchlight. Imagine doors framed with iron, heavy but enduring, their surfaces etched with symbols whose meaning has long since been lost to time. Such craftsmanship would not merely serve survival, it would shape identity. The underground world might have blossomed with its own architecture of meaning. Shrines carved into alcoves, stone seats arranged in circles, walls painted with pigments mixed from minerals. In the absence of the sky, perhaps they painted their own constellations, maps of imagined heavens that never needed to be seen above. These would be worlds of symbolism and structure, of stone that had been coaxed into carrying memory. And yet, the underground is not forgiving. Stone erodes, collapses, fills with water. Ventilation shafts clog, fires blacken walls with soot. What survives for centuries may still be erased in millennia. If there were once such carved cities, their ruins might now be indistinguishable from the natural labyrinth, their marks softened into suggestion. Archaeology itself struggles with caves. Even recent human traces are often erased by the patient hand of dripping water, the relentless reshaping of mineral flow. Still, the mind lingers with the image. Vast underground plazas lit by flickering fire, pillars etched with strange forms, stairways leading deeper still. Architecture not of marble, but of limestone and clay, built in darkness, yet alive with intention. Perhaps those halls echoed with the same ambitions that later raised pyramids and temples, the impulse to carve meaning into matter, to make the world around us reflect the stories within us. Maybe it was so. Maybe it was never so. Maybe the caverns hold nothing more than the slow breathing of the earth itself. Yet, even if they built, even if stone once rang with chisels and fires, once glowed in smelting pits, time itself might be the most merciless eraser of all. And so the question lingers, quiet but insistent. Even if they carved their world below, would the earth allow us to see it now? The imagination walks a narrow path here, between what might be and what will always remain only dream. We have descended with care, tracing water through the dark, lifting air through fissures, touching the faint warmth of fire beneath the crust. Piece by piece, the conditions for survival underground have been laid like stones in an arch. Each fits tentatively, and the arch holds, but only just. Biology and geology do not slam the door shut. They whisper instead, perhaps. For biology, the body is not bound to light. We know this from creatures of the deep ocean who never see the sun, yet live entire lives in absolute night. They eat what drifts down, or what they coax from chemical vents, building slow ecologies that endure in silence. The lesson is clear. Life can adapt, even when the sun is gone. For geology, too, the answer bends. The Earth's skin is punctured everywhere by cracks, caves, rivers that twist unseen. The planet is not sealed. It breathes faintly. There are voids where air can circulate, spaces where water pools, and seams of fuel buried like forgotten offerings. Yet between possibility and certainty yawns a gulf as wide as any cavern. For every underground river, there are miles of dry stone. For every crack that might carry breath, there are passages that choke. For every warm seam of coal or gas, there is the risk of poison, of collapse, of fire raging unchecked in places where escape is impossible. A society that tried to root itself here would live at the edge of endurance. Resources underground are both abundant and fragile. The river that sustains might suddenly shift course. A vein of fuel might burn itself out, leaving only ash and suffocating smoke. Food, always the hardest problem, would need clever solutions. Mushrooms, perhaps. Insects. Fungi coaxed into strange forms. A diet thin but sustaining, built not on plenty, but on patience. Imagine such a people, living where survival is never casual, but always chosen. Each day a small triumph over the dark. Their lives would be fragile, not only because of accidents, but because of time. For time underground is an enemy like no other. A collapsed tunnel erases generations of labor. A flood fills a hall and makes it vanish as though it never was. Rock, given enough pressure, forgets what passed through it. Sediment drifts, calcite grows, layers build, and soon the work of hands is folded back into the Earth's memory, smoothed until even the idea of a dwelling disappears. And so we return to the threshold, not of survival, but of remembrance. Could they have lived here? Perhaps. Could they have endured? For a while, yes. Could we know them now? That is the hardest question of all. Because traces are fragile, and absence is not always proof of nothing. The Earth is old, and its library of stone is vast. Pages are torn, burned, dissolved. Entire worlds have vanished before us, unremembered except in hints and fragments. If a civilization once lived beneath the ground, its survival would have been possible. But its survival in memory, in evidence, is far less certain. Still, to stand at the threshold is to feel the possibility breathe against your cheek. The idea does not crumble when touched. It lingers, like a candle in a draught. This chapter, then, does not close with a final word. It closes with a cautious acknowledgement. Underground life, while precarious, belongs within the realm of could be. The vault of stone does not forbid it. The laws of nature do not forbid it. They only make it difficult, fragile, easy to lose. And this is the invitation onward. If the great question is not whether they could have lived, but whether we could ever find them, then the story must turn. From survival to remembrance, from life to trace, from the beating of hearts in caverns to the faint imprints those hearts might have left in stone. Perhaps they walked there in the dark. Perhaps they sang songs that echoed through vaulted halls of limestone. Perhaps they carved pillars and etched marks, built fires that glowed against wet rock, watched their children grow beneath the quiet breath of the earth. But if they did, what remains? The next step of our descent is not into the caverns themselves, but into the search, into the work of reading stone, of listening to silence, of asking how memory survives. For that is the true challenge, not living in the dark, but leaving enough behind that the light of the future could find them. And so, with gentle breath, we step forward. The ground waits, and the story deepens. Carrying that thought onward, the question begins to turn from whether life beneath the earth was possible to whether such life could ever be known. It is one thing to imagine people in caverns, walking by borrowed light, feeding on mushrooms and fish from subterranean rivers. It is another to ask, what would remain if they were truly there? How would the earth, with its quiet patience, treat their bones, their tools, their shelters? This is where we step into the strange silence of what might be called fossils that never were. On the surface of the world, the rules of remembrance are already selective. Most creatures that have lived on Earth are gone without a trace, their bodies consumed by weather, fire, or other creatures. Only in rare conditions does life leave behind a durable imprint. A bone covered quickly by sediment, a shell pressed into soft clay, a body hidden in an anoxic marsh. Layers of sand or silt cover the remains, and over millions of years, stone replaces them, turning once living tissue into a fossil. In this way, the Earth keeps a diary, page after page of strata, each filled with the pressed flowers and brittle notes of the lives that passed. Underground, however, that diary grows harder to write. In the open air, rivers flood, deltas expand, deserts shift, and sediment settles. Underground, the story is different. Caverns are not places of steady deposition, but of collapse and erosion. Instead of being quickly covered, remains are often exposed. Bones left on the cavern floor might rest for a while, but the conditions around them are rarely gentle. Moisture seeps through porous stone, carrying minerals that dissolve, corrode, and stain. Water drips steadily from the ceiling, coating surfaces with calcite or washing them away entirely. Over decades, centuries, millennia, a skeleton lying in such a place does not harden into stone. More often, it softens, breaks, and disappears. Think of a femur, heavy and strong. In open air, it may linger, bleaching under the sun. Buried in river sediment, it may mineralize, slowly becoming something that lasts. But in a damp cavern surrounded by limestone walls that drink and weep water, the bone begins to soften. The mineral within it leaches out, the structure collapses into powder, and within a span that is brief in geological time, it is gone. What remains is not a fossil, but absence. And absence is a difficult kind of evidence. Artifacts, too, face the same erosion. A stone tool left in a cave might endure, yes, but caves shift. Rockfalls bury chambers, and then, later, other movements open them again. Objects left in the path of this slow shifting are crushed or ground into fragments. Clay vessels might shatter, their shards scattered into rubble so fine it could never be recognized as once crafted. Wood, which carries the warmth of hands, does not last at all. In dampness, it rots. In dryness, it crumbles. In time, it returns to dust. Even fire, that most visible of human marks, becomes uncertain below. A hearth built in the open may leave behind ash layers, charcoal, even burned stone. In caves, smoke clings to ceilings, but collapses bury it, or later waters wash it away. A fire that once roared with voices gathered around might be erased so completely that nothing more than a faint discoloration on a stone ceiling survives. And even that faintness may be mistaken for something else. This fragility raises a quiet paradox. If an underground people lived, their traces might not survive long enough for us to see. And if they did not live, the result looks the same: emptiness. How then does one distinguish between absence that speaks and absence that simply is? The stone does not tell us easily. There are echoes, though, of how time erases and transforms. In some caves known to archaeology, bones of bears, lions, and other great animals have been found. But even these are rare and often damaged. The few that remain are the exception, not the rule. For every bear skull carefully preserved in a cavern deposit, there are countless more that vanished without note. If animals who stumbled and lived and died in caves naturally leave only the faintest record, what hope would there be for the delicate remains of people who once may have made these spaces their home? And yet, there are whispers that absence itself can sometimes be read. When archaeologists sift through soils, they often look not only for objects, but for changes in texture, in color, in chemical composition. Burned soil, rich with charcoal, may indicate a fire long since gone. Phosphates, released by waste and food, can linger in the earth far longer than bones or tools. Even when the tangible vanishes, the chemical ghost of presence sometimes remains. It is faint, uncertain, and often disputed, but it reminds us that the ground remembers in ways subtle and easily overlooked. Perhaps then, if there were underground dwellers, their bones and tools may have vanished. But other traces, faint enrichments, odd discolorations, subtle alignments of rock that do not quite seem natural, could remain. Reading them would be like listening to the faintest whisper in a room where echoes confuse every sound. It requires patience, humility, and the recognition that certainty will always recede just beyond the next page of stone. Imagine, if you will, an underground hall where once a family gathered. They lived there, worked there, grew old and died there. Time passed, the walls flaked, water seeped, a collapse buried the chamber. Thousands of years later, the roof shifted, and the chamber opened again. Archaeologists might enter and see nothing but stone and rubble, damp and silent. And yet, hidden in the soil, perhaps there is a slight rise in phosphates, a thin layer of soot beneath calcite flowstone, a strange arrangement of fragments. Nothing conclusive, nothing that shouts civilization, but enough to raise the possibility that absence itself is not entirely blank. In this way, the underground becomes not only a challenge to live within, but a challenge to read afterward. A library where many pages are erased, where ink runs, where most entries are lost. Fossils, those reliable bookmarks of time, are simply not written here. Instead, we are left with partial hints, ghosts of ghosts, and the recognition that much of what once was will never be known. For you, listening now, perhaps already drifting in thought, this may be a comfort, because it reminds us of the humility required to look backward in time. We do not hold the full record. We never will. The earth keeps its secrets, and what it chooses to share is scattered, fragmentary, never whole. The dream of an underground civilization may be erased almost entirely, even if it once was real. But erasure itself is a kind of story. It tells us that the earth is not a museum carefully labeling and preserving, but a restless artist who paints over her canvases again and again, never pausing to let the first layer dry. Soon, the thought will deepen further. If bones and tools may not fossilize, if the obvious records slip away, what other signs might we seek? The question becomes larger, stretching from fossils to architecture, from artifacts to echoes of absence itself. And as we continue, we will look not just for what survives, but for the strange ways the earth hides what was once alive. For now, it is enough to rest in this recognition that beneath the surface, fossils that never were may be as telling as fossils that are, and that the story of what might have been underground is written as much in silence as it is in stone. From here, The thought opens into the larger forces that move far beyond the scale of bones or tools, beyond even the fragile chambers where a fire might have burned. These are the forces that write and rewrite the earth itself, that stretch across spans of time so vast that centuries seem like minutes in their long rhythm. They are the Earth's erasers, the processes that sweep away records and replace them with silence. If an underground civilization ever lived, it is these motions that would most surely hide them, folding their memory into the restless skin of the planet. Subduction is one such hand of erasure. The continents float on plates of stone that glide and clash atop the mantle's slow currents. Where one plate dives beneath another, whole sections of crust are drawn downward, back into the earth. In those trenches, thousands of meters deep, what was once land is consumed. Mountains crumble and sink, ocean floors vanish, and with them, any marks they might have carried. A city carved beneath a mountain ridge, a chambered hall within a plateau, could, over millions of years, be folded down into molten depths, erased not gently but completely, as if written on paper and then burned to ash. Floods, too, act as erasers, though in swifter bursts. When rivers swell and glaciers melt, water rushes across valleys, carrying soil, stone, and memory away. Underground, floods are sudden and devastating. A cavern filled with dry air can become a torrent in moments, its walls scoured, its chambers drowned. Whatever lies within, remains, tools, even entire hollowed chambers, may be smashed into fragments or buried in silt. Then, when the water recedes, it leaves behind a new floor, smooth and blank, as if nothing had been there before. The story that had been written is washed away, and the next chapter begins on clean stone. Earthquakes move differently, but their silence is no less absolute. A tremor runs through the crust, and stone collapses into voids. Roofs fall, walls break, passageways vanish. Whatever lay within is buried beneath tons of rubble. It might seem that burial is a form of preservation, yet in most cases it is only destruction. Rock crushes what it hides, grinding bones into powder, snapping vessels into shards. And even if some fragments endure, they are entombed so deep, so tangled within rubble, that no one may ever see them again. To be buried is often, in truth, to be erased. These are not exceptions, but the rhythm of Earth itself. The planet is not static. It is restless, always folding, breaking, flooding, shaking. And time, deep time, is the measure in which these erasures unfold. A century may pass and a chamber may still stand. 1,000 years, and perhaps traces linger. But 1,000,000 years, 10 million, 100 million, and the odds narrow to near nothing. The Earth edits her diary with a relentless hand, scraping away entries not once, but again and again, until only faint traces remain. Consider for a moment the scale of this editing. Human history, as we know it, stretches back perhaps 10,000 years to the first written records. The age of the dinosaurs lasted for more than 100 million. And yet, even from those vast reigns, we hold only fragments, scattered bones, a few tracks, the occasional preserved nest. How much more fragile, then, would be the record of a hidden civilization, living in shadows and stone, erased by every tremor and flood? Their story, if it was ever real, would be among the most fleeting, vanishing almost as soon as it was told. And yet, there is a kind of poetry in this silence. For time does not simply erase, it also shapes. The absence left behind is not empty, but filled with suggestion. A collapsed cavern tells of an earthquake. A smooth layer of sediment tells of a flood. A folded mountain range tells of subduction. The story may not name its characters, but it whispers of the stage they walked upon. Perhaps, in this way, the vanished are not entirely lost, but woven invisibly into the rhythms that remain. For you listening, perhaps already half drifting, there is a comfort in knowing that the earth is never still. It does not hoard the past jealously, nor preserve every trace. Instead, it renews itself constantly, always moving forward, always changing. To search for the unseen civilization is to search within this ceaseless motion, knowing that much has been erased and more will be erased still. It is like reading a book where every page is torn and rewritten, every chapter overwritten by a newer hand. The meaning lies not only in what survives, but in the gaps where words have vanished. The silence of vanished centuries, then, is not an accident, but the natural state of the earth. Our own cities, built of steel and concrete, may feel permanent, but they too will erode, collapse, be buried, or carried away. Given long enough, even the greatest structures will fade. The Parthenon, the pyramids, the skyscrapers of our age, all will one day vanish into rubble and dust. The same fate would meet any civilization underground, no matter how ingenious. To endure forever is not granted to stone, nor to bone, nor to memory. And yet, there is value in imagining. To picture an underground world lost to floods and quakes is to feel the weight of time itself. It humbles us, reminds us that even our present, so vivid and undeniable, is but a brief flicker. In the vast canvas of geological time, entire civilizations may be as fleeting as sparks in the dark. Some sparks may leave embers we can find. Others may vanish without trace, known only through the wondering of those who come after. Soon, we will follow this wondering further and consider not only how time erases, but how traces might linger despite the odds. For while the erasers of Earth are relentless, there are also quiet ways in which memory endures. Hidden pockets, preserved shadows, whispers that slip past the editor's hand. But before we search for them, we pause here in the silence, in the recognition that much has already been lost, and that loss itself is part of the story. Carrying that thought onward, we arrive at a quieter, subtler form of inquiry. If bones and tools may vanish, if chambers may collapse, if floods and earthquakes erase their bold signatures, perhaps the only evidence left is not in the objects themselves, but in the faintest of echoes they leave behind. Not a fossil, not a wall, not an artifact. Instead, a trace, a whisper impressed into stone and mineral, so fragile that it almost seems more imagination than reality. Yet, for those who search, these whispers are worth listening for. Ghost signatures of what might once have been. One such whisper could be chemical. The earth is not uniform. Every layer of stone holds its own recipe, a blend of minerals formed by the conditions of its birth. And into these recipes, life leaves marks. Charcoal adds carbon. Smoke alters the balance of trace elements. Ash deposits strange particles not normally present in rock. To a geologist, these small deviations may stand out as anomalies, places where the expected order has been bent by some unseen hand. If, long ago, fires burned in hidden chambers, perhaps the soot of those fires lingers still, trapped in seams of limestone or basalt, a faint darkening in layers otherwise pale. Carbon is one of the most telling signatures. When organic matter burns, it releases not only smoke, but tiny black particles, carried by air and absorbed by surfaces. In caves explored by modern humans, soot marks can still be seen. Black smudges high on ceilings, left by torches centuries or millennia ago. Archaeologists read these stains as evidence of occupation, of movement, of presence. But what if the same smudges existed deeper, older, beyond known history, a layer of soot trapped between mineral deposits, sealed away by dripping water. A film of black, preserved like an entry in the margins of a stone diary. If such a layer were found, anomalous and unexplained, might it be the residue of hands we have never named? And not only soot, but the way minerals gather and change. In caverns, water is always at work, carrying dissolved minerals, leaving them behind in sheets and veils. Stalactites grow slowly, each drop a painter's brushstroke. But if something interrupts this process, heat from fire, smoke, human oils from skin contact, the mineral patterns shift. Deposits grow uneven, discolor, or halt for years. Later, they resume, and the result is a strangeness, a discontinuity, a pause in the otherwise patient rhythm of stone. To a careful observer, such interruptions are like punctuation marks in the long, flowing sentences of geology. They do not prove who held the torch or who carved the wall, but they hint that something happened, something that left stone unsettled. Even residue of habitation could linger in chemistry. Ammonia traces from waste, phosphate layers from decomposing matter, subtle enrichments of soil that do not belong. These are not dramatic signs, but quiet distortions of the natural balance, like echoes caught in a cave's acoustics. They would be ghostly, requiring the most sensitive instruments to detect, and yet they might tell stories more eloquent than any preserved artifact. Imagine a chamber sealed for tens of thousands of years, its floor rich in unusual phosphate, its ceiling stained with soot. What conclusions would a future geologist draw? Would they see the shape of occupation or dismiss it as anomaly, accident, chance? But this is the difficulty of ghost signatures. They rarely shout. They whisper, and whispers can be misunderstood. A wildfire above might send smoke into underground fissures, leaving soot without any human hand. Shifts in groundwater chemistry can create anomalies that mimic the residues of habitation. Mineral layers can pause due to climate, not culture. For every trace that hints of hidden life, another explanation may stand nearby, equally plausible. That uncertainty is part of the dreamlike quality of the search. We are not dealing with proof, but with suggestion, with shadows that hover between science and speculation. Perhaps that is fitting. If an underground civilization existed, their marks would not be clear to us. They would not resemble the sunlit ruins of Rome or the grand temples of Mesopotamia. Instead, their record would be fragile, obscured, folded into the slow rhythms of geology. To look for them is to learn to read in dim light, to accept that the margins may never fully reveal what was once written there. It is like searching for footprints in the tide, knowing most have already been washed away, hoping only to glimpse the faintest outline before the sea takes it too. And yet, there is a certain beauty in imagining these ghost signatures. They invite us to pay attention to the small, the easily overlooked. They remind us that history may not always appear as monuments and artifacts, but as discolorations in stone, as traces in chemistry, as whispers caught beneath layers of silence. To search for them is to practice humility, to accept that the grandest stories may survive only as the faintest residue. For you, drifting now, perhaps half within the flow of thought and half within the pull of sleep, this idea is a gentle one, that memory does not need to shout to exist. Sometimes it is enough to linger as a suggestion, a shadow, a pattern slightly out of place. In our own lives, too, what endures may not always be monuments, but small traces, quiet marks left in passing. Ghost signatures are everywhere, waiting for those who learn to notice them. Soon, we will look toward another layer of this search, for even the faintest signatures face another challenge. The Earth herself, restless and ever-changing, does not always allow them to linger. What is left behind today may be gone tomorrow, folded into the ceaseless motion of stone. Before we turn to those further erasures, we hold here for a moment with the quiet thought that perhaps, just perhaps, some faint signature has survived, hidden like a whisper waiting to be found. From here, the path of thought bends toward what can be known, toward those rare and remarkable places where human hands have carved deeply into the earth, leaving behind chambers, corridors, sanctuaries, and shelters that still whisper of their time. These known underground sites are not speculations, but lived realities. And yet, even they remind us of the frailty of memory when pressed beneath stone. The story they tell is not one of permanence, but of how easily even deliberate creation slides toward obscurity. Consider the honeycombed depths of Cappadocia in present-day Turkey. Entire cities were carved into the soft volcanic tuff. Vast labyrinths of rooms connected by narrow tunnels, some descending several levels below the surface. These were not idle experiments, but living places, homes for thousands, equipped with ventilation shafts, stables, chapels, storage cellars, and defenses against invasion. The people who shaped them made stone their dwelling, yet in doing so they also ensured that their legacy would be hidden from immediate sight. For centuries, many of these subterranean cities lay forgotten, swallowed not by destruction, but by silence. Farmers knew of small cave entrances, perhaps, but only in recent centuries did explorers realize the immense scale of what had been created. If one of the most extensive underground civilizations built by humanity itself could slip so quietly into obscurity, how much easier would it be for older, more fragile traces to vanish entirely? Even in Cappadocia, what remains is only partial. The soot that once stained ceilings has often been washed away by groundwater. The wooden doors, once sliding into place to bar entry, have long rotted into nothing. Organic matter leaves only faint ghosts. A groove in stone where grain might have been ground. A discoloration that hints at long-burned fires. The deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes that stone preserves shape but rarely essence. The voices of those who lived there are absent. Their tools, unless of metal, are gone. Their stories dissolved into dust. Salt mines offer another lesson. Some are centuries old, like the Wieliczka mine in Poland, stretching for miles underground. Carved halls and chapels, statues of salt, delicate staircases, all testify to both utility and artistry. And yet, salt is a fragile host. Moisture seeps in and walls begin to sweat, slowly eroding what was shaped. Constant human intervention is needed to maintain them, to shore up ceilings, to prevent collapse. Without maintenance, salt's crystalline surfaces crumble, and rooms once alive with sound return to silence. If in mere centuries these spaces require endless care, what chance would they stand across millennia without human presence? Then there are catacombs. Rome's vast necropolises beneath the city, Paris's ossuary labyrinths, the tunnels beneath Alexandria. They are at once evidence of preservation and of decay. Bones endure for a time, sometimes centuries, but not forever. In the humid embrace of soil, they soften, break, and eventually vanish. Even stone inscriptions, carefully etched by grieving hands, can blur under the pressure of water and earth. The catacombs exist still, but they exist in diminished form, reduced by the quiet labor of geology and time. Modern bunkers, too, speak a similar truth. Built of reinforced concrete and steel, designed for war or for fear of it, they are thought of as impregnable. Yet even here, cracks spider through walls. Water infiltrates, rust eats at metal fittings. In abandoned bunkers from the Second World War, moss grows on ceilings. Paint peels into flakes. entire stairwells collapse into heaps of rubble. Engineers of that time imagined endurance, but time is more patient than any design. A few decades suffice to turn certainty into ruin. What these sites together reveal is a pattern of inevitability. Whether carved from volcanic tuff, dug from salt, etched into limestone, or poured from concrete, all underground places require constant tending to resist the slow embrace of geology. Without intervention, they fade. Even when we know exactly where they are, when they are cataloged and protected, they are not immune. A shift in groundwater levels, a minor earthquake, even the simple settling of stone can erase details in ways that no one intends. One might imagine, then, an ancient underground world, not hypothetical in human history, but one already proven by Cappadocia and countless lesser-known sites. And yet, if those within the last few thousand years can nearly disappear, what hope would remains older by tens or hundreds of thousands of years have? Perhaps only the most accidental clues would endure. A wall smoothed by repeated touch, a chamber whose geometry betrays human intent, a vein of mineral altered subtly by fire. It is sobering to realize that even our modern constructions, crafted with advanced materials and designs, do not stand beyond this law. Engineers debate how long our deepest mines and storage facilities might remain stable if abandoned, and the answers are rarely encouraging. Tens of thousands of years seem almost impossible. Even thousands are uncertain. The Earth is not a static vault, but a restless host, shifting and breathing in rhythms too vast for us to control. And yet, there is beauty in this realization. For these sites remind us that to build underground is to write into a medium already moving. Stone is not paper. Salt is not canvas. They erase as they preserve, carrying forward only fragments. The Cappadocians left us echoes, not full voices. The catacombs left us bones, but not breath. The bunkers left us concrete shells, but not the lives that once sheltered there. Each site, in its own way, teaches humility before time. If you pause with the thought now, you may picture yourself walking through one of these places. You, drifting in imagination, step into a narrow passage, the air cool and still. Your hand grazes a wall carved long ago, and you feel not just the stone, but the weight of forgotten years. Perhaps you see the soot of an ancient flame, perhaps only the faint trace where a door once was. Around you, silence. The place is real, yet it is also vanishing, even as you stand within it. That sensation of presence coupled with disappearance is the essence of underground memory. Soon, we will move from these known examples toward deeper speculation again, looking not only at what survives, but at how fragile traces might dissolve. For now, it is enough to carry forward this lesson. Even when the Earth preserves, it does so imperfectly. It gives back glimpses, not wholes. And perhaps that is why searching for lost civilizations beneath the surface is less a matter of finding walls or bones, and more a matter of learning to listen for whispers. Whispers that even the most enduring underground cities cannot hold forever. Carrying the thought onward, all of these glimpses, fossils that fail to form, soot that fades, catacombs that collapse, gather into a single, humbling conclusion. The record of a people is astonishingly easy to lose. Civilization, for all its monuments and ambitions, does not leave behind a guarantee of memory. Even when inscribed into stone, time is the greater artisan, softening edges, erasing words, breaking structures into fragments until their origin becomes guesswork. The underground world, which at first might seem like a hidden vault, a safe chamber for preserving what was, is instead revealed to be even more fragile than the surface. What was once bustling with breath and fire can, in a few silent centuries, return to nothing more than shadow and dust. One might imagine a community, thriving in their subterranean corridors, living out generations beneath the ground. Their hands polish walls smooth, their fires leave soot, their tools strike stone. For them, life feels solid and enduring, a world enclosed yet certain. But from the vantage of deep time, those gestures are as fleeting as the ripple of a pebble across a pond. The soot is washed away, the tools corrode, the very walls they carve collapse inward as geology rearranges the earth. In the span of 1,000 years, their traces blur. In 10,000, they dissolve. In 1,000,000, they are gone. Memory itself is fragile in much the same way. Oral stories drift and bend, each retelling slightly reshaping the past. Written words crumble unless carefully guarded. Languages die, and with them, entire frameworks of meaning vanish. If civilizations above the ground struggle to preserve their voices, how much more uncertain would the fate of one that deliberately buried itself? What is left would not be a library but a whisper, and whispers are easy to miss. We can think of the archaeological record as a kind of shoreline, where fragments wash up, broken and scattered, hinting at what once sailed the sea. Rarely does the whole vessel arrive intact. More often it is a shard of pottery, a discolored stone, an odd seam of mineralization. Archaeologists piece together entire worlds from these fragments, but the worlds remain incomplete. Interpretations written in the spaces between what is found. If even our known history emerges this way, how much thinner, how much more uncertain would be the echoes of a civilization lost underground? The silence of time can be deceptive. It might feel absolute, but often it is simply selective. A bone may vanish, but a stain of carbon might linger in a cave roof. A chamber might collapse, but the geometry of its collapse could still hint that it was once hollowed by human hands. These are the ghost signatures we search for. Faint, indirect clues that resist disappearance. Yet the difficulty is that they do not shout. They do not announce, "Here we were." Instead, they murmur. They require patience, humility, and imagination to hear. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson of a vanishing civilization, that presence is not enough. To exist is not to endure. To shape stone is not to outlast. What remains is filtered through the sieve of geology, accident, and chance. And what falls through, which is almost everything, is irretrievable. When we walk through known underground sites, Cappadocia, Welichka, the Roman catacombs, we are not only visiting places preserved, but places already largely erased. We experience them not as they were, but as the survivors of time, stripped and altered, incomplete. The people who sang in those halls, who lit lamps in those tunnels, who wept in those chambers are not present. Their traces are thin, their memory a delicate filament stretched across centuries. And yet, perhaps, there is a kind of beauty in this impermanence. For to realize how easily civilizations vanish is also to understand how extraordinary it is that any memory survives at all. A shard of pottery, a wall still standing, a soot stain. These become treasures not because they are complete, but because they are improbable. Each one is a whisper that escaped the eraser of time, a voice carried further than it had any right to be. You, listening now, drift with that thought. How improbable it is that we know anything at all of those who came before, and how thin the margin is between remembering and forgetting. If an underground civilization once lived, it might be that its record lies entirely beneath thresholds we cannot yet see, or that it has already been erased beyond recognition. Its legacy would not be monuments, but absences. Not fossils, but voids where fossils should have been. Not artifacts, but anomalies barely distinguishable from natural formations. Its memory would be like a faint echo in a cavern, perceptible, but only if one knows to stop and listen in the right place. And so the question lingers. If not stone or bone, where else might traces survive? If the earth itself proves too restless, if memory in matter fails, then perhaps we must look elsewhere. Human beings, even in their earliest forms, have always reached beyond themselves, into story, into symbol, into the sky. Myths can carry memories long after bones are gone. Stars can hold alignments long after walls have collapsed. If there is a clue to be found, perhaps it waits not in the silence of stone, but in the persistence of story and the constancy of the heavens. Soon, we shall turn upward to consider how tales and skies might preserve what the earth erases. For now, let this thought rest. Civilizations do not vanish in a single gesture. They fade, they blur, they fragment until only whispers remain. And to listen to whispers is a different kind of archaeology, one that requires patience, imagination, and a willingness to let silence speak. From here, the story opens into another kind of record. Not one carved into stone or hidden in caverns, but one carried in the breath of generations. If artifacts crumble and walls collapse and fossils never form, what is left to endure? Perhaps only story, fragile yet resilient, flowing from one mouth to another across centuries, reshaped but not extinguished. In many ways, myths are the world's oldest archives. They require no libraries, no clay tablets, no chisels in rock. They live in memory, and memory, while mutable, has astonishing longevity again and again, across cultures distant from one another in both time and geography. There appear motifs of people dwelling below, of journeys downward, of knowledge hidden in the earth's folds. The Greek myths speak of the underworld not merely as a realm of the dead, but as a place with gates, guardians, and paths leading back again. Hindu traditions recall the Nagas, serpentine beings said to inhabit vast palaces beneath rivers and mountains. Native American stories tell of emergence, entire tribes climbing upward from lower worlds into the one we now inhabit. These are not isolated curiosities. They are refrains, recurring like a melody remembered in fragments, carried across lands and centuries. It might be that such stories are simple metaphors. Descent into darkness could symbolize death, trial, or transformation. The womb itself is a kind of cavern, protective and enclosing, and so caves naturally become symbols of origin and rebirth. But even so, the persistence of the underground motif suggests something more layered, as if cultures, separated by oceans, found themselves reaching for the same imagery, as though some shared echo reverberated beneath human consciousness. One could imagine story as a kind of sedimentary layer itself. With each generation, a detail shifts, an image changes, just as a river rearranges grains of sand. But the outline remains. The flood myths that appear in Mesopotamia, in India, among the Maya and the Inca, need not mean a single cataclysm shaped them all. Perhaps instead, it means that the memory of water, of its power to erase and begin anew, is etched so deeply into human life that it will always resurface. Could the same be true of descent myths? Could they be shadows of experiences long forgotten by history, but not by imagination? Consider the cave paintings of Lascaux, deep in France, drawn some 17,000 years ago. To reach them required crawling through narrow passages, descending into near-total darkness. What compelled those artists to carry flickering lamps into the deep? Perhaps ceremony, perhaps necessity, perhaps the sense that truth or vision resided below rather than above. The paintings remain as evidence of the act, but the meaning is carried forward only in speculation and analogy. If people already understood caves as sacred thresholds, then how much older might the pattern be? You, drifting now, can think of story as a river that flows differently from the rivers on maps. It flows not across land, but across time. It carries not silt, but memory. Sometimes it floods, sometimes it dwindles, sometimes it disappears underground for centuries before re-emerging in unexpected places. When we listen to ancient myths of descent, we might be standing beside one of these re-emergent springs, catching a glimpse of something older than the story itself. The archetype of descent has a curious persistence in literature, too. Dante imagines his way downward through circles of the inferno, guided step by step into darkness, before climbing once again toward the stars. In Norse myths, the world tree's roots extend into hidden realms, with wells and beings that shape fate itself. In Mesoamerican traditions, the underworld is not only a place of death, but of trials, where heroes must prove themselves before they can rise. Each of these layers carries its own cultural flavor, but the skeleton of the story is strangely familiar. To go down is to encounter something essential, something hidden, something transformative. Perhaps it is simply the universality of caves. Every culture had them. They were refuges, shelters, and mysteries. To enter them was to step outside the known world. But perhaps, too, these stories are older than the cultures themselves. They may be inherited in ways we cannot yet measure, fragments of memory so deep that they predate writing, predate cities, perhaps even predate agriculture. When the first farmers dug into the earth, planting seeds in rows, they may already have been enacting an echo of the descent motif. Life comes by going into darkness, by burial, by concealment, and then by emergence again. Could story, then, be older than evidence? Could these recurring motifs be a more durable fossil than bones or tools? It is difficult to say, and we must be cautious not to read too much into poetry or myth. But it is striking how myths endure even when empires collapse. The libraries of Alexandria may burn, but oral traditions in small villages can persist for millennia. We see this in the Vedas of India, recited and memorized across countless generations, maintaining patterns older than most civilizations we know. We see it in Polynesian wayfinding chants, encoding vast knowledge of stars and seas without maps or compasses. If such knowledge can endure through words alone, then why not also the impression, however faint, of encounters with the underground? The human mind is itself an archive, though an unreliable one. Memory reshapes, but it also preserves. The underground motifs that appear across the world might be coincidence, or psychological archetype, or simple metaphor. But perhaps, quietly, they are also residue. Not residue that we can measure in carbon dating or uncover with a trowel, but residue all the same. The impression of human beings who once lived below, their memory leaking upward into the realm of story, even as their physical traces vanished into stone and dust. If this is true, then stories that outlast stone are more than imagination. They are another form of evidence, fragile but stubborn, distorted but enduring. They invite us not to believe blindly, but to listen carefully, to treat narrative not as noise, but as signal, faint and buried. The tale of people below might not prove an underground civilization ever lived, but it may be the echo of something worth considering, a reminder that memory takes many forms and that not all of them are written in matter. And so the thought rests here. Even when artifacts fail and bones dissolve, story continues, reshaped, revoiced, passed like a torch in darkness. Perhaps what survives longest of any civilization is not its stone or its metal, but its story. Soon, we shall turn from these myths to another realm of echo, the instincts and archetypes within us, which may themselves be fossils of memory, carried not in stone, but in mind. For now, the whisper lingers. Stories, fragile yet enduring, may outlast even the stones, carrying that thought onward. We leave the realm of spoken stories and enter something quieter, something less tangible yet equally enduring. The instincts that live in the body itself. For even when words are lost, the body remembers. Reflexes, fears, fascinations, these too can be a kind of fossil, pressed not into stone, but into the folds of the nervous system. And when we consider how humans have always responded to darkness, to caves, to enclosed spaces, we may find hints of something older than any myth, older even than any carved wall. Darkness is not neutral to us. It draws out both fear and fascination. The cave mouth has always been both shelter and threat, a space where warmth and protection coexist with suffocation and peril. When the first humans wandered into caverns, carrying flames that threw shadows like living creatures upon the walls, they must have felt a peculiar mixture of awe and unease. To this day, you can feel it yourself. The breath catching as the light fades, the senses straining to fill the absence, the strange comfort of being surrounded, yet also trapped. Claustrophobia is one expression of this instinct, a tightening of the chest when walls press too close, when the air feels thick, when escape seems uncertain. Yet alongside this fear lies another contradictory impulse, the pull toward safety in enclosure. Infants calm when swaddled, when held close, when surrounded. The womb itself is a chamber, dark and enclosing, a first shelter that leaves a lingering imprint on how safety feels. Caves echo this earliest memory. Protective, enclosing, a place where the outside world cannot reach. Why then do we dream of hidden cities below the earth? Why do tales of underground realms capture imagination so easily? Perhaps it is because, buried in instinct, there is already a dual truth, that the underground is both cradle and tomb, refuge and prison. It embodies the deepest tensions of survival, protection from predators above, yet danger of suffocation within. We cannot help but imagine what might happen if this balance were mastered, if life could thrive in the place that frightens and shelters us most. Some scientists suggest that our responses to darkness are evolutionary echoes. Predators often lurked in shadow, so fear was an advantage. Yet at the same time, caves offered warmth, stable temperatures, and defensible entrances. To seek them out was also to secure survival. Perhaps our ambivalence toward enclosed spaces is not confusion, but memory, a record of our ancestors weighing safety against suffocation, comfort against confinement. You, drifting now, may have felt it before. Standing at the entrance of a cave, the air suddenly cooler, carrying the scent of stone and dampness, the sound of your own breath amplified in the silence, a pull inward to explore, a pull outward to retreat, both coexisting, both undeniable. That tension is itself a story, written not in language but in pulse and breath. Dreams of hidden cities, of vast halls lit by secret fires, may be extensions of this instinct. If the body remembers caves as shelter, the mind can easily stretch that shelter into something larger, more wondrous. Where instinct feels only the safety of enclosure, imagination builds streets and temples underground. Could it be that the stories of subterranean realms are not inventions alone, but elaborations of sensations coded into our very bones? Even children, before they learn the myths of cultures, invent caves of blankets and pillows, hiding places beneath tables and beds. They construct enclosed worlds and fill them with imagination. The delight is not only in the building, but in the being, in sitting hidden yet safe, surrounded yet free to breathe. What if that impulse, so simple and universal, is the faint echo of something older? Perhaps instinct remembers. Perhaps the joy of hidden spaces is a shadow of ancestors who once found true refuge underground. There is another layer, too. The darkness of caves sharpens other senses. In absence of sight, sound becomes fuller, touch becomes more attentive, imagination fills the gaps. Perhaps this sharpening felt to ancient people like an opening of perception, a kind of secret wisdom accessible only in the dark. If so, then the fascination with underground life might not only be about safety, but about insight, as if the earth itself whispered differently when one was inside it. And yet, there remains the fear, the claustrophobia, the anxiety of confinement. This too could be memory. If people once dwelled below, some may have perished there, cut off by collapse, by flooding, by smoke. Perhaps those moments pressed into instinct as much as the refuge did. The body does not easily forget where survival was threatened, so the underground becomes both sanctuary and warning, etched into instinct with equal weight. Philosophers might call this duality symbolic. The cave as the womb, the cave as the grave. Psychologists might call it projection, the unconscious mapped onto stone. Anthropologists might call it archetype, the shared residue of common environments. But from another perspective, one more speculative, we might wonder, are instincts themselves fossils of experience too ancient to track? If people once lived, even briefly, beneath the surface, would not the sensations of that life leave traces not in rock, but in reflex? Perhaps instinct is the body's myth, its way of telling stories to itself. The racing heart at the thought of confinement, the sigh of relief in enclosure, the fascination with hidden chambers, each is a line in that story. And just as myths may preserve memory across time, so too might instinct preserve impressions of lives long dissolved. If so, then our unease and our dreams of the underground might not be accidents. They might be the only inheritance left from a way of life erased elsewhere. Not evidence in stone, but resonance in pulse. Not fossils of bone, but fossils of feeling. Fragile, unprovable, yet persistent. And so we arrive at a gentle pause. Fear and safety entwined, claustrophobia and comfort woven together, fascination pulling against dread. The instinctive responses we carry may be whispers of survival, or of memory, or simply of the body's way of navigating the unknown. Soon, we will turn to the sky and the cosmos, to ask whether echoes of hidden life might stretch beyond Earth itself. For now, the thought remains. Perhaps instinct remembers what evidence cannot. From here, the thought of hidden lives beneath our feet bends outward, like a tunnel curving toward another horizon, toward another world entirely. For when we wonder about underground civilizations, we are not only turning our gaze downward into the earth, but also upward into the cosmos, where the same conditions that might once have driven humans into caverns reappear on a planetary scale. Mars, with its thin atmosphere, its ceaseless radiation, and its cold dust storms, seems strangely like a reflection, an inverted twin of Earth's underground. To imagine a colony, there is to imagine in many ways a civilization below. On the red planet, the surface is harsh, restless, and unkind to fragile life. Yet, just beneath it, within lava tubes formed in the planet's volcanic past, scientists suggest there may be havens where radiation is weaker, temperatures are steadier, and dust storms cannot reach. The idea carries a whisper of familiarity. We picture humans in suits walking across alien deserts. But when night falls, when protection is needed, they step down into the ground, into shelter much like our ancestors once sought in limestone caverns and hidden grottos. The parallel is striking, as though Earth has already given us the blueprint for survival beyond itself. And so the mind drifts back to the earliest humans crouched by torchlight, painting ochre animals on cave walls. Perhaps without knowing it, they rehearsed for futures far away, where survival might again require the embrace of rock overhead. The stone ceiling becomes both shield and cradle, a place where heat is trapped, where stories echo, where people dream of stars even when they cannot see them. In this way, the cave and the cosmos become entwined, one as memory, one as possibility. Think for a moment about the rhythm of such life. On Mars, colonists may build gardens under artificial light, water cycling through narrow channels, air scrubbed and shared. In Earth's deep past, people may have kept fires alive in caverns for months or years, smoke seeping through fissures, warmth slowly breathing outward. Both settings demand a careful balance, a symphony of control over resources. Underground on Earth, failing to tend the fire meant cold and darkness. Underground on Mars, failing to tend the systems means the same. In both places, survival is fragile. Yet within that fragility arises a profound intimacy with the environment, an awareness of every drop of water, every spark of warmth. Radiation, that invisible hail falling endlessly from the sun and stars, is one of the greatest dangers on Mars. Above ground, unprotected, it seeps into the body, slow and relentless. But beneath basalt or regolith, its force is dulled. This truth is old. Stone has always been a shield. It muffled storms, kept predators at bay, and offered humans a place to sleep without fear of sudden sky-borne harm. What we call an underground civilization on Earth might therefore be seen not as a curiosity, but as an ancient rehearsal for the cosmic stage, an instinct written into us by the Earth itself. And then there is silence. Deep underground, whether in Cappadocia's carved cities or in imagined Martian tunnels, sound falls away differently. It is absorbed, softened, delayed. The same hush that makes Earth's caves sacred to myth might one day settle over Martian chambers, where children grow up never hearing wind, never knowing thunder. In their quiet, the underground and the extraterrestrial converge, a continuity of stillness, as though both the earth below and the sky beyond belong to a single family of hushed domains. The imagination drifts further. Could it be that when humans dream of hidden cities, shining halls beneath mountains, crystal palaces under roots, they are not only recalling some lost ancestral refuge, but also anticipating the habitats of tomorrow? In myth, the underground city is both haven and exile, both wonder and warning. On Mars, it might be exactly the same. The very idea of living below carries tension, safety wrapped in limitation, sanctuary laced with longing. You, drifting now, might feel the weight of stone above, yet also the yearning for sky. Both truths coexist. Both pull gently on the soul. Earth itself, in this view, becomes an ancient Mars. Long before we imagined spacecraft, our ancestors faced climates that forced them into the ground. Ice Age winds swept across plains, predators ruled forests, and yet underground there was stability, warmth, a different kind of belonging. Mars simply externalizes that story. The planet as it is today may be hostile, but its caverns promise what Earth's once gave. A pause from the chaos above, a pocket of life where survival is possible. To look at those Martian tubes is to look into a mirror of deep time. Even the tools we plan for Mars, pressurized suits, oxygen systems, artificial lights, echo ancient methods. Fires for warmth, pigments for light, rituals for courage. Different materials, same intentions. One era etched charcoal onto limestone walls. Another programs LEDs to mimic sunlight. Both gestures fight back the dark. Both are whispers of resilience. In philosophy, there is a gentle thought that perhaps memory is not only personal but species-wide, that deep instincts, even dreams, may be shaped by patterns so old we no longer recognize their origin. Our mixed feelings about caves, fear of suffocation, yet peace in their shelter, might be part of this inheritance. And so too our fascination with Mars, with its promise of hidden havens, might stir something more than scientific curiosity. It might awaken an ancient familiarity, the sense that we have hidden before, that we have endured in silence before, that we have waited in the dark for the dawn to come. From here, one can almost see an unbroken line, stretching from the first human huddled in a cavern's hollow to the future settler descending a Martian shaft. Between them is vast time, vast distance, but the gestures are alike, seeking stone for protection, fire, or its future kin for light, stories to hold on to hope. The continuity humbles us. Civilizations vanish, technologies change, yet the simple truth remains. Life often survives best below, sheltered, quiet, hidden for a season. And if we wonder whether some ancient civilization of Earth once lived mostly underground, perhaps we should also ask, might our own future civilizations live the same way? Not in limestone, but in basalt. Not in Earth, but on Mars? The symmetry is haunting. What we suspect of the past may be the shape of the future. What was once necessity may become destiny. Soon, the thought will shift again, from stone and soil and cosmic shelter toward something even less tangible. The way memory lingers not in matter, but in myth. But for now, let the echo remain, soft and steady. Above and below are not opposites, but reflections. Earth and Mars, cavern and cosmos, shadow and survival. Each is part of a single, endless story. Carrying that reflection outward, the thought expands beyond Earth and Mars, beyond even the familiar sunlit worlds, into the greater silence of the cosmos. If we wonder whether humans once lived beneath stone, we might also wonder whether other beings, those we call alien for lack of a better word, have done the same. The universe is wide, its stages varied, its climates often severe. And again, when faced with danger from above, one solution repeats itself. Go below. Life seeks shelter. It curls into crevices. It burrows. It hides in caverns of water or ice. If this principle holds true on Earth, why not elsewhere, scattered across distant moons and planets? Consider Europa, one of Jupiter's frozen moons. On its surface, a thick crust of ice stretches in fractures and plains, shining faintly in sunlight. But beneath that shell, scientists believe, is an ocean larger than all of Earth's seas combined. A vast hidden sea, warmed by the tidal forces of Jupiter's immense gravity. Its waves forever trapped under miles of ice. If there is life there, it is by definition an underground civilization. A community sealed beneath ice rather than rock. Not like us, perhaps. Not building with tools or shaping stories in paint. But existing in chambers of darkness, lit only by chemical reactions and geothermal vents. Perhaps they cluster around mineral-rich outflows? Strange beings with no need for light. Their entire world defined by the overhead roof of ice. And if such creatures exist, how would we know? The ice above them muffles all direct sight. Only faint traces reach outward. A plume of water vapor erupting into space. a chemical imbalance drifting across the moon's surface, whispers of organic molecules caught by our probes. In this way, their civilization, whether microbial or complex, would resemble what we imagine of Earth's lost underground dwellers, hidden, nearly erased, detectable only by indirect echoes. To search for aliens, we become archaeologists of the unseen, looking for ghost signatures in chemistry rather than stone. Farther still lies Titan, Saturn's enigmatic moon, with rivers and lakes of methane and ethane flowing across its surface. Here, caves might be carved not in limestone, but in frozen hydrocarbons, caverns of ice harder than steel, chambers filled with alien air. In such a place, life might look nothing like our own. Perhaps there are organisms that breathe methane as easily as we breathe oxygen, beings that rest in liquid lakes by day and retreat into caverns by night, protected from cosmic rays and temperature shifts. The idea is speculation, fragile as frost, but it stirs the imagination. An underground city of Titan would not glow with firelight, but with chemical luminescence, the slow burn of reactions we do not yet fully understand. And then there is Enceladus, another moon of Saturn, bright and small, with geysers that shoot salty water into space. Beneath its ice shell, too, is a hidden ocean, warmed by the friction of tides. Again, we return to the theme. Beneath the harsh, barren surface lies shelter, stability, perhaps even life. Again, underground means hope. What is striking is how universal the logic seems. Cosmic radiation is deadly. Atmospheres are often thin or non-existent. Surfaces are swept by storms or frozen into lifeless stillness. Yet beneath, whether under rock, ice, or methane, conditions soften. Temperatures level, chemistry stabilizes, the possibility of life blooms. To live underground is not just a quirk of Earth's past. It may be a cosmic pattern, a rule that life everywhere follows when survival is at stake. Now imagine what civilization could mean in these places. On Europa, perhaps colonies of creatures form near vent fields, exchanging nutrients in webs as intricate as cities. On Titan, maybe there are beings that sense one another through vibration or chemical scent, gathering in clusters inside protective caves. We cannot assume walls or architecture as we know them, but we can assume order, rhythm, gathering, those essentials that define society in any form. And in those imagined societies, we might recognize echoes of our own, the urge to cluster together, the instinct to protect, the rhythm of life repeating in hidden chambers. For us, the thought holds humility. If advanced beings elsewhere live underground, our telescopes might never see them. They would be invisible to our gaze, just as a cavern full of people on ancient Earth would leave little trace on the surface above. Civilization could thrive for millennia and vanish without cosmic neighbors ever knowing it was there. In this sense, perhaps the cosmos is already filled with life, humming quietly beneath layers of stone and ice, unseen not because it is rare, but because it is cautious. And so the search for aliens becomes the search for echoes. We look for chemical imbalances in atmospheres, for unexpected plumes, for isotopes that suggest metabolism rather than chance. We do not find the beings themselves. We find the breath of their world, the traces of their existence, shadows pressed into the materials they touch. Just as archaeologists on Earth find soot in caves, carbon residues, or scratches in stone, astronomers find methane, oxygen, hydrogen plumes. Both are faint, both are whispers. Both require us to lean in with patience and humility. You might imagine yourself drifting now, floating not in a cavern, but through space itself, pausing at these frozen moons, Picture the silence of Titan's lakes, the hidden warmth of Europa's ocean, the quiet jets of Enceladus spraying against the black. Each is a secret place. Each hides its truth beneath a roof. Each may carry within it a story of life that has never seen the stars. The thought is both sobering and wondrous. What underground life means universally is that survival often chooses concealment. Life bends away from danger and tucks itself into folds. It does not need grand monuments, only continuity. For us, civilization means buildings, language, art. For the cosmos, it may simply mean endurance, organisms passing information, however they define it, from one generation to the next, safe beneath their protective shell. And yet, in that endurance, there may be kinship, whether human or alien, whether lit by fire or chemical glow. The gesture is the same: to seek shelter, to gather, to create rhythm against chaos. Civilization underground, wherever it arises, whispers a shared truth, that fragility finds strength not in standing exposed, but in dwelling hidden, close to the bones of a world. Soon, our path will carry us toward reflection on how these possibilities mirror back into myth and memory, how story itself may be the most enduring shelter of all. But for now, let the imagination linger here, on ice oceans and methane caves, on beings unseen yet perhaps not absent, their presence marked only by the faintest breath beneath an endless sky. And so, all these strands, myths that linger like half-remembered dreams, instincts that draw us both toward and away from the dark, visions of other worlds where life might take refuge beneath stone or ice, begin to braid themselves together into something quieter, subtler. They form what might be called a long whisper, stretching not across a room or a moment, but across centuries, across species, across planets themselves. It is not a shout, never clear enough to be proof. It is a murmur, a tremor just below hearing, an invitation to lean closer, though we may never fully understand what is being said. Perhaps the stories humanity has carried through time are embers of such a whisper. When we speak of people emerging from caves or of hidden cities below mountains, we may not be recording history in any straightforward sense. Yet the persistence of these images suggests that they touch some deeper layer of memory, or at least of need. Embers do not blaze, but they smolder. They last long after the flame has died, glowing faintly, fragile, able to be rekindled if given breath. Myths work in much the same way. They glow with the faint fire of survival, passed from one teller to the next, even when their origin has faded beyond reach. Maybe caves themselves are more than hollows of stone. To step into one has always been more than a physical act. It is to cross a threshold, to pass into a liminal space that feels older than language. Caves are not just voids carved by water or time. They are doors. They open into other worlds, not necessarily literal civilizations hidden in the earth, but the deeper geographies of the mind and the collective imagination. When we enter them, our breathing changes, our senses adjust, and we feel the weight of stone pressing in. It is no wonder that people dream of them as entrances to other realms, or as sanctuaries, or as the womb-like origins of life itself. The door may open inward rather than outward, but it remains a door all the same. And if myths are embers and caves are doors, then perhaps our instincts are the winds that stir them. Fear of darkness, fascination with hidden chambers, the recurring dream of descending into an unseen city. These may be remnants of something once vital, or they may simply be the psyche's way of rehearsing survival, ensuring that we do not forget how to tread carefully in the unknown. Instincts are quiet messengers, not always logical, often contradictory, Yet they too whisper across generations, carried not in words but in pulses of the body, the quickened heart in a tunnel, the sigh of relief at the sense of enclosure, the tug of curiosity that makes us look back even as we step away. When we extend this line of thought outward into the cosmos, the whisper lengthens. The very possibility of underground life elsewhere, beneath Europa's frozen sea, within Titan's methane caves, or hidden under Martian stone, becomes a kind of echo, mirroring our own myths and instincts on a cosmic stage. If we imagine such lives, we are listening not only to scientific possibility, but also to the faint resonance of our own stories projected into the stars. It may be that the universe speaks in patterns, repeating solutions across worlds, sheltering life beneath surfaces, protecting it from radiation, nurturing it in the hidden warmth of vents and fissures. If so, then our myths of underground people are not only cultural memories, but also cosmic premonitions, hints of a universal script that life performs again and again. You, drifting now, might feel that whisper as a thread, running lightly through everything we have traced. It is there in the soot-stained walls of old caves. It is there in the fear and awe of the narrow passage. It is there in the silent oceans beneath alien ice. None of these alone prove anything, but together they weave a tapestry of possibility, a murmur of continuity. Myths, instincts, and cosmic echoes, each one faint, but together forming a harmony just strong enough to be felt. There is humility in acknowledging this. For all our sciences, all our instruments, all our stories, we may still be standing on the edge of understanding, holding only fragments. But fragments can be powerful. A shard of pottery, a remembered tale, a faint chemical trace in a plume of vapor. All are small, yet all point beyond themselves. They are signals, however fragile, that something more might exist. The whisper may be long, but it is not silent. Perhaps that is the lesson of this chapter, that the most enduring signals are not the loudest, but the softest. Stone erases, time collapses, civilizations vanish. Yet whispers linger. A story carried by a grandmother, an instinct felt in the chest, a plume of water jetting into space. All endure in ways that surprise us. They do not prove, they suggest. They do not command, they invite. And in that invitation lies the chance to wonder, to imagine, to let the ember glow a little longer. Soon, the path will turn again, back toward Earth. For while the stars hold their mysteries, the ground beneath us still waits with its own meanings. Now, let us return to Earth, to reflect on meaning, to see how the echoes of myth and instinct might guide us not only into the darkness below, but also into the light of our own reflection. Carrying that thought onward, we begin to recognize that memory, whether written in books or carved into stone, is far more fragile than we often allow ourselves to believe. Civilizations rise with confidence, convinced their monuments will endure, that their names will echo forever. And yet history shows us again and again how swiftly the earth can fold them back into silence. On the surface, we already see how easily grandeur is reduced to ruin. The jungles of Central America once swallowed entire cities of stone, their pyramids and plazas hidden beneath green canopies for centuries until rediscovered. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of writing itself, mud brick walls dissolved back into dust, leaving only shards of clay tablets as reminders. Even in deserts where stone should last forever, winds grind inscriptions to faint lines, barely legible, as if time itself were erasing its chalkboard. Each case reveals the same truth. Permanence is an illusion, and the survival of memory is always provisional, always dependent on chance. If this is the fate of civilizations that lived openly beneath the sky, with their temples exposed to light and their monuments designed to endure. Then what of those who might have lived in shadow? Underground, the erasure is greater still, for caves do not preserve in the same way that deserts or volcanic ash might. They shift, collapse, flood. Walls drip with water. Ceilings flake with minerals. Passages reshape themselves with slow patience. What is left behind is not displayed but entombed, sealed away where no casual traveler may stumble upon it. And so, if a people once thrived below the surface, their memory might be doubly fragile. Fragile in being hidden, and fragile in being vulnerable to the very geology that sheltered them. Think of the stories we tell about vanished surface kingdoms. Atlantis beneath the waves, El Dorado concealed in forest, the Tower of Babel lost to heaven's disfavor. Each tale begins with presence, then shifts to absence, explaining how something so great could be lost. Underground civilizations, if they existed, would need no myth to vanish. The Earth itself would handle that forgetting. A flood in a cavern could wash away years of living. A collapse could grind tools to powder. Even fire, if it raged in those tunnels, would consume wood, bone, fabric, all the little evidences of daily life, leaving only streaks of soot upon rock. And even that soot could dissolve, folded into stone as if it had never been. This fragility of memory is not only physical, but also human. We rely on stories to carry knowledge forward, but stories change, fragment, and fade. A generation forgets to repeat a name and it dies. A symbol loses its context, and it becomes decoration instead of record. If we consider how many surface cultures were lost simply because no one remembered to write their language, we begin to see how complete the disappearance of an underground people might be. Not only their tools and bones, but even the very idea that they once lived could evaporate into silence. And yet, in that fragility, there is something strangely humbling. To know that memory itself is temporary, that civilizations are not immune to the erasures of stone or mind, is to realize that permanence was never the point. What endures may not be the monuments, but the influence, the faint ripples left behind. Rome's aqueducts crumble, but its concept of roads still guides us. The Mayas' temples weather, but their calendar still intrigues. The names of Sumerian kings are gone, but their invention of writing remains. Perhaps then, if an underground civilization did exist, what we might still feel is not their ruins, but their echoes, instincts, myths, symbols that seeped upward into later cultures, blurred but present. You, drifting now, might think of memory as a flame in wind. It flickers, it bends, sometimes it gutters out. Yet even when extinguished, its warmth lingers for a moment longer, fading slowly from the air. Civilizations are like that. They burn brightly, then vanish. But their warmth may linger, not always in tangible records, but in subtler ways. The fragility does not make them meaningless. It only makes them delicate. Consider, too, how even our own world of steel and circuits is not immune. Skyscrapers would rust and fall within centuries if left untended. Satellites in orbit will tumble and burn. Digital archives, if power ceased, would disappear as quickly as breath on glass. We like to imagine that our age is immune to forgetting, yet history whispers otherwise. We are as fragile as any who came before. This awareness makes the question of underground lives not absurd, but poignant. If we, with all our technology, could vanish so quickly, why not they, long before us? Soon, we will look at another layer. Not just the fragility of memory itself, but what it means. For if civilizations are so easily lost, then the significance lies not in whether they are remembered, but in how we, the inheritors of silence, choose to listen. And so, softly, we step toward that reflection, carrying forward from the fragility of memory there is another layer that steadies us: the simple humility of not knowing. It might seem unsettling, even incomplete, to rest inside questions without answers. Yet, there is a kind of quiet strength here, an acknowledgement that vastness cannot always be charted, that some mysteries are meant to remain horizons rather than destinations. Science itself whispers this lesson to us. It does not arrive with proclamations carved in certainty. It arrives instead with method, with ways of observing, testing, questioning. It builds scaffolds not to reach finality, but to continue climbing, higher and higher, into clouds that often shift before we can name their shapes. What we call knowledge is often a temporary arrangement, a pattern drawn in sand, awaiting the next tide of discovery. In this way, to embrace not knowing is not to abandon truth, but to sit within its unfolding. Perhaps that is why unprovable questions exert such a gentle gravity on the mind. They do not demand immediate resolution. They linger, like the faint glimmer of stars that arrive from so far away. Their light is already ancient. They remind us that answers, even when found, are never the end of wondering. They open new doors, new corridors of speculation, where thought becomes meditation, and meditation becomes a way of honoring mystery. Speculation, when handled softly, is not recklessness. It is reverence. To imagine possibilities that civilizations may once have walked beneath our feet, or that memory itself can be folded into stone, is not to deceive ourselves, but to rehearse humility. We are acknowledging, without defensiveness, that what we know is partial, that what lies beyond may be immeasurable. In this way, wonder itself becomes a discipline. It keeps the intellect from hardening. It allows the heart to dwell in awe, even when the map ends. Think of a child watching shadows ripple on a cave wall. The forms are unprovable, their sources unseen. Yet the act of wondering about them shapes the child's world as surely as daylight does. So it is with us, wandering through questions that resist measurement. What is hidden beneath layers of earth, or tucked away in epochs too far gone to trace? What thoughts did vanished peoples hold when they too gazed at the stars? To sit with such unanswerable questions is to share a kind of kinship with every human before us who once stared into the unknown and felt both small and expansive at once. Perhaps this humility is also a kind of protection. If all mysteries were solved, the world might lose some of its depth, some of its softness. Not knowing keeps the edges blurred, like a dream half-remembered. You, listening now, drifting as thought dissolves into silence, may find comfort in that uncertainty. The fact that you cannot measure every detail of the cosmos, cannot chart every story of the earth, allows imagination to breathe. It allows you to live not only in the known, but in the possible. Consider how often the greatest advances were born from what was first unknowable. Lightning, once a terrifying fire from the heavens, became a doorway into electricity. Fossils, once thought to be tricks of stone, became windows into life's ancient forms. Each began as a question, long unanswerable, long resisted. To not know is to remain open to discovery. To not know is also to keep humility close at hand, for we cannot say with certainty where the boundaries of truth truly lie. And so speculation becomes a meditation, not a frantic search, but a gentle circling, like a bird gliding on warm air currents. The thought rises. Could there be hidden chambers still untouched? Could myths be shadows of something more? We do not seize these ideas as fact. We cradle them as possibilities. They steady the mind in its restless seeking. They remind us that answers are not always required to feel wonder. In the silence of not knowing, imagination begins to echo. It may be that these echoes are as valuable as discovery itself, for when we wonder, we are rehearsing humility in the grandest sense, accepting that the universe exceeds us, that history exceeds us, that even the story of Earth is a vast text we have barely begun to read. The unanswered becomes a kind of poetry, lines half-written across the sky. There is also a quiet intimacy in these unprovable questions. When you lie awake, drifting between sleep and wakefulness, thoughts sometimes arrive uninvited. What came before me? What lies beyond me? What stories hum within the silence of time? In that space, uncertainty does not press heavily. It floats gently, like a feather in still air. And perhaps that is its gift. To not know is to remain light enough to wonder. Humility is not only bowing before what is greater, it is breathing into what cannot be finished. Science, philosophy, poetry, each in its own way, circles the unknown, never exhausting it. To carry questions without conclusion is to live as part of a larger rhythm, one that does not demand resolution, but invites participation. You, listening now, are part of that rhythm. Your curiosity is a thread, woven with countless others across generations, stretching back to those who first told stories around fire. From here, let us drift onward. For just ahead waits another reflection. How these unprovable questions not only keep us humble, but expand the very way we see meaning itself. The next thought will wait, gently, like an unopened page, ready for whenever your mind wishes to turn toward it. Carrying the thread of humility further, we arrive at a crossroads of thought. The tender place where two possibilities stand side by side, neither commanding victory, neither vanishing entirely. Maybe such a civilization lived. Maybe it did not. Both conditions breathe in parallel, and each carries lessons that stretch beyond the question itself. The truth may remain hidden, sealed by stone and silence, yet the act of weighing these conditional realities becomes its own meditation. A way of learning how possibility itself shapes human imagination. If they lived, then the earth beneath us carries more than geology. It carries a memory deeper than our own, a history that belongs not only to us, but to voices lost before us. To imagine them alive is to imagine corridors of firelit chambers, knowledge etched on walls, families whispering their stories into the underground dark. It is to see that humanity, or something close to it, has walked this path before, has carved order out of shadows, has perhaps even struggled with the same questions of meaning we face now. If they lived, then our sense of uniqueness softens. We are no longer the first dreamers, only one thread in a vast weave of attempts at civilization. And perhaps that recognition brings humility. A reminder that human achievement is not a solitary flame, but one among many sparks that rise, glow, and drift into night. If they did not live, if all is silence and speculation, then there is another lesson. The mystery becomes not about them, but about us, about why our minds reach so naturally for stories, why we build echoes even when none are proven. To imagine an underground civilization that never existed is to watch ourselves at play, weaving meaning into absence, conjuring patterns from shadows. That too is a profound discovery. That imagination is so intrinsic to being human that we create companions for memory where none stand. To recognize that possibility is to recognize that wonder itself is our inheritance. Maybe they lived. Maybe they didn't. Both roads converge at the same truth. Possibility itself is a teacher. It shows us that meaning does not depend only on certainty. The value of the story is not diminished if it turns out to be myth. Myth can be a mirror, reflecting the shape of human longing. Myth can be a vessel carrying questions across time. Even if no underground chambers were ever carved, even if no hidden city beats beneath the earth, The very act of asking awakens something in us. It awakens patience, imagination, humility. It reminds us that the unknown is not empty, but full of potential paths. If they lived, then perhaps they too told stories of those who came before them, even if those ancestors never truly walked the earth. If they didn't live, then perhaps the myth of them is our own version of that same act. The timeless need to anchor ourselves in larger narratives. In both cases, what emerges is the same thread, that humanity, whether ancient or modern, seeks meaning in echoes. The underground city may be stone and fire, or it may be only metaphor, but its gift is identical. It keeps us wondering, keeps us alive to possibility. Consider how this duality resembles the way we regard the cosmos. Maybe life exists elsewhere. Maybe it does not. If it does, then the universe is more crowded with story than we can yet fathom. If it does not, then our aloneness becomes a rare and solemn responsibility. In either case, the question transforms us. It shifts our perspective, stretches the horizon of what it means to be alive. The underground civilization functions in the same way. Whether real or imagined, it bends our thinking toward depth, reminding us that meaning is found not only in evidence, but in the spaces between. You, listening now, can feel how both branches of possibility invite the same quiet reflection. If they lived, the earth beneath your feet is layered with untold history. If they didn't, then the earth is layered with your own longing for connection, your own instinct to weave mystery into matter. Both thoughts are gentle companions, and neither demands urgency. They wait in silence, allowing you to drift among them as though resting between two doors, each leading into wonder. This balance of maybe yes, maybe no, is not weakness. It is strength. It resists the rigid need for one definitive answer. It honors the truth that life itself is conditional, fragile, often unknowable. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson. That existence is not about mastering certainty, but about living gracefully with possibility. Like a tide that moves both toward shore and away, the question of their existence carries us in both directions at once. And in that movement, we learn how to float. To hold two realities side by side is a skill as old as storytelling itself. Ancient myths often lived in that space, half history, half dream. They told of gods who might have been kings, of cities that might have been metaphors, of journeys that might have been inward as much as outward. The underground civilization lives in that same tradition, maybe real, maybe imagined, but in either form it whispers of something larger than ourselves. The human need to locate meaning beneath the surface, to search the depths not just for stone, but for story. And perhaps, in the end, the question is less about whether they lived or did not live, and more about how possibility itself is a gift. For if we can hold both realities with equal tenderness, then we can also learn to hold our own lives in that same balance. Maybe our choices matter more than we think. Maybe they matter less. Maybe our small stories are lost in time. Maybe they ripple far beyond us. To live with both maybe and maybe not is to practice humility, patience, and wonder in every moment. So let this thought linger softly. If they lived, their echoes are folded into earth, waiting for discovery. If they did not, their absence is still a presence, carried in our imagination, teaching us that possibility itself is enough to shape meaning. And from this balance, we drift gently toward the next reflection. How the lesson of possibility stretches into every hidden corner of the human story, asking not for conclusion, but for wonder that does not end. From here, the thought turns inward, for the underground is not only a matter of stone and soil, but also a mirror we carry within. To imagine hidden cities and lost civilizations is, in a way, to imagine the shape of our own minds. Beneath the surface of waking life, beneath the bright constructions of our daily words and gestures, there are chambers of thought that remain unlit. Just as caves and tunnels stretch unseen beneath familiar ground, so too does consciousness extend beyond what daylight ever touches. The underground, in this sense, is not only geography, but metaphor. Its hidden depths remind us that within every person lies a terrain of memory, fear, desire, and silence. We walk across the topsoil of our thoughts each day, believing the world is no deeper than what we notice. Yet, when stillness comes, when the noise of the surface quiets, we sometimes hear an echo from beneath. Perhaps it is a forgotten memory, or a sudden intuition, or a dream that refuses to vanish with morning light. In those moments, we glimpse that our inner world is vast, layered, and secret. Not unlike the imagined civilizations below the earth, darkness, then, becomes not only an absence of light, but an invitation to introspection. In caves, the eye cannot see far, and so attention turns inward. In the darkness of thought, the same happens. Stripped of clear outlines, we learn to feel rather than merely observe. Fear and safety mingle here. As some feel claustrophobia underground, so too do some feel unease when confronted with the inner chambers of the self. Yet, just as caves can shelter life, so can introspection shelter meaning. It is in darkness that seeds germinate, and it is in silence that the deeper parts of the mind take shape. Civilization, when viewed through this mirror, is more than stone walls and markets. It is the outer architecture of the inner self. The buildings we raise, the rituals we practice, the systems of belief we cling to, all may be reflections of hidden structures within. The underground city becomes a symbol of what is buried in us. The need for protection, the yearning for belonging, the dream of permanence in a transient world. In this way, every imagined cavern beneath the earth is also an imagined cavern within the heart. Consider how myth and psychology often meet on this ground. Depth has long been equated with mystery. The underworld in ancient stories was not only a place of the dead, but also a place of revelation, a journey into the hidden parts of existence. To descend was to learn. In dreams, too, we often find ourselves in basements, caves, tunnels. The subconscious made spatial, the unspoken given form. These dreams may not be literal, but they are no less real in their symbolism. They tell us that within, just as beneath, there is always more than what the surface suggests. And if one extends the metaphor further, the collapse of underground chambers mirrors the collapses within us. Sometimes an unacknowledged thought breaks open, flooding the mind like water rushing into a hidden tunnel. Sometimes forgotten grief, long buried, resurfaces, reshaping the inner landscape. Yet, just as new caverns can be carved by rivers, new chambers of understanding can form through reflection. The underground is not static. It shifts, it breathes, it erodes and rebuilds, just as consciousness does. Perhaps that is why stories of hidden civilizations feel so compelling. They echo the truth we already sense about ourselves, that much of who we are lies unseen, that under the neat streets of personality, there are entire networks of unlit rooms. Some we fear to enter, some we may never reach, and yet their presence shapes the surface above. You, drifting now, might sense how this thought folds back upon itself. To speak of underground mysteries is also to speak of your own hidden mind. The darkness outside becomes a mirror for the darkness inside, and in both there is not only fear, but also possibility. Just as archaeologists uncover traces of ancient lives, so can reflection uncover forgotten parts of the self. Just as stone holds memory in its silent weight, so do we hold memory in layers not easily seen. Civilization itself, with its writing, its monuments, its laws, can be thought of as the outer skin of the underground psyche. What we cannot fully hold inside, we build outside. A city is perhaps a projection of consciousness, a dream given brick and mortar, a way of making visible what would otherwise remain hidden. To imagine a vanished civilization beneath the earth is also to imagine a vanished part of ourselves, some lost dream, some silenced story, that nonetheless still leaves an echo. In this light, darkness ceases to be something to escape. It becomes a teacher. Just as the underground shields life from harsh surface weather, so can silence shield the fragile truths we are not yet ready to bring into light. Darkness is not empty. It is pregnant with meaning. It is the soil where roots grow. It is the chamber where thought deepens. It is the reflection that shows us more than surface mirrors ever can. And so, when we think of the underground, we may think of it less as a place apart, and more as a mirror of what we carry. The civilizations imagined there become metaphors for the layers of being. The hidden chambers of stone become the hidden chambers of memory. The narrow tunnels of rock become the narrow tunnels of unspoken fear or unarticulated hope. And the great caverns, vast and echoing, become the spaciousness of imagination, the part of us that can hold endless story without exhaustion. Soon, we will return to the outer frame, to consider what meaning emerges if such civilizations truly existed or did not. But before that, let this thought settle, that to speak of the underground is always to speak of ourselves. What is hidden below is not only mystery in stone, but also mystery in mind. And perhaps, in this recognition, the underground becomes less a distant speculation and more an intimate companion. A reminder that beneath every surface, within and without, there are depths waiting, silent, unlit, but alive. Carrying the mirror of the underground still in thought, there comes a moment when the path bends upward again. The darkness does not vanish all at once, but slowly, in soft gradients. The walls that pressed close seem to widen. The ceilings rise. The air carries a faint change, and the sense of ascent takes hold. What was hidden has offered its lessons, and now, step by gentle step, the journey turns toward the surface. In this ascent, there is no rush, no need to leave the dream behind abruptly. The underground lingers as a presence, a whisper at the edge of perception, even as the notion of daylight grows nearer. It is as though the underground were never meant to be a permanent home, but a place of learning, a chamber of reflection where one could walk in shadow to better understand the light. To rise again is not to dismiss it, but to carry part of its silence into the waking world. The transition between darkness and light has always held symbolic weight. In myth, the return from descent is as important as the descent itself. Orpheus ascending from the underworld, Aeneas emerging to continue his journey, the hero returning from the cave after facing trial. Each of these speaks to the rhythm of inward and outward, of hidden and revealed. And so, in imagining a civilization below, we imagine not only those who lived in silence, but also the meaning of coming back, of what it would feel like to emerge. To stand again on the surface would not be to forget the underground. It would be to see the surface differently, as though daylight had been repainted by contrast. The sky might appear wider, the wind sharper, the sound of birds louder, all because the mind remembers the silence below. This is the lesson of the ascent, that to dream deeply is to wake more fully, that to imagine what is buried is to value what lies before the eyes. Perhaps this is why the underground so often enters human story as dream. It feels liminal, neither entirely real nor entirely unreal, like a vision one has while drifting into sleep. And just as dreams leave impressions more than details, the thought of hidden civilizations leaves traces rather than certainties. The ascent, then, is like waking. The dream fades at the edges, but its mood clings, altering the day that follows. You, drifting now, may notice how ascent feels not like a break, but a continuation. The ground beneath becomes less heavy, the space more open, and the tone shifts gently, like music modulating into a brighter key. Yet, in that brightness, the slower rhythm of the underground remains. It does not rush you out, but carries you carefully upward, ensuring the dream is not shattered, but transformed. In philosophy, too, this ascent mirrors the act of reflection. One descends into hidden depths of thought, exploring shadows of uncertainty, mysteries of possibility, and then returns carrying insights, however fragile. It is a cycle as old as contemplation itself, going inward to come outward, descending to ascend, losing the surface to see it again with clearer eyes. And perhaps, in this metaphorical movement, lies the deepest gift of imagining hidden civilizations. Whether they existed or not becomes less the point. What matters is the journey into that possibility, the descent into unknowing, and the gentle ascent back into the known. Civilization, surface or underground, becomes a mirror for thought itself. Fleeting, fragile, shaped by memory, erased by time, yet always re-emerging in new forms. Consider how even waking from dreams leaves something behind. A half-remembered image, a feeling, a rhythm of story that lingers like an aftertaste. So too with the underground. Emerging from it does not erase it. It shapes how one sees the open sky. The surface becomes not simply ordinary ground, but a reminder of the extraordinary that lies beneath and within. There is humility in this return. To rise to the surface is to accept that the underground is not ours to keep. It is transient, like a vision glimpsed in meditation, vanishing as soon as light intrudes. And yet, its very vanishing is what makes the surface precious. To touch the sky after being below is to understand sky differently. To feel the sun after shadow is to value warmth more deeply. Civilizations themselves ascend and descend in this way. They rise to the surface of history, visible and brilliant, then sink into obscurity, leaving only whispers. Each cycle is both loss and renewal. Each ascent carries something of the underground with it, though not always in ways we can measure. Perhaps our myths, our instincts, our echoes of story are the remnants of such ascents. Memories carried from depths too deep to preserve in stone. Soon, thought will turn toward closing reflections, toward gathering the strands of dream and philosophy into a softer whole. But before that, let this ascent linger. Let it be felt as a movement, gentle, patient, like walking upward through long, sloping corridors where the first hints of surface air drift downward. There is no hurry. The surface will be there. The dream will remain, even as it transforms. If you are drifting, this thought will wait here. The underground as dream, the surface as waking. Each part of the same cycle, each needing the other. To descend was to listen, to ascend is to carry what was learned. And in that movement, the story finds not an ending, but a way of preparing quietly for what comes next. Now, as the upward slope begins to level, thought turns back softly to where the journey began. The question that first opened the path remains, waiting with the same quiet invitation: what if Earth's first civilization lived underground? It has been there all along, like a lantern at the entrance of a long corridor, casting just enough glow to lead us inward, and now outward again. And in returning to it, we find that it has changed. Or perhaps we have changed, carrying with us the echoes of stone, myth, and imagination gathered in the depths. The question itself is both fragile and resilient. Fragile because no evidence compels us to answer yes. Resilient because imagination refuses to let it fade. We have traced layers of geology, touched stories in myth, compared the hidden world beneath our feet to the possibilities of distant planets. And still, the question endures. Could there have been others before us, dwelling in caverns, shaping tools by lamplight, breathing air that seeped through cracks in stone? Perhaps they did, and if so, their traces are gone, swallowed by time's erasures. Or perhaps they never did, and the underground belongs only to story, instinct, and metaphor. Yet in either direction, the beauty lies in the asking. To live in a world where such a question can be posed is itself a gift, for it reminds us that certainty is not always the most important thing. Sometimes, the act of wondering is richer than the answer. Think of how the surface civilizations we know have already faded. Great cities swallowed by jungles, entire empires reduced to a few lines carved in stone. If that much can be lost in open air, how much more fragile would the memory of a hidden people be, deep below? The imagination leans easily toward them, because loss has always been part of the human story. We glimpse ruins, and we fill the silence with possibility. An underground civilization becomes another way of honoring the fragility of memory, the way even the brightest fires burn out, leaving only faint warmth in the ashes. And yet, if there never were such dwellers of shadow, the question is no less meaningful, for it shows how the human mind longs to populate the dark. Where there is silence, we imagine voices. Where there is absence, we imagine presence. Caves become homes. Myths become histories. Stories become echoes of lives that never were. To wonder about underground civilizations is to hold a mirror up to ourselves, to see how deeply we resist emptiness. The question is, in this way, a reflection of our own instinct to people the unknown, to dream within the gaps. You, drifting now, may feel how the rhythm has slowed, how the thought itself has softened. No urgency remains, no need for proof, only the gentle symmetry of return. We began with a question, wandered through stone and story, and return with the same question, but held more lightly, as one might hold a feather in the palm. Perhaps they lived, perhaps they did not. In both possibilities, there is wonder. The beauty of yes is clear. It allows us to imagine lives hidden within the earth, tiny fires burning in caverns, communities whispering across stone, their stories rising like smoke through fissures into the myths we later inherited. To say yes is to give company to the dark, to feel that we are not the first dreamers of shadow, but the beauty of no is just as deep. It leaves the underground untouched, pure silence, an unbroken space where only the natural world lived and moved. In this version, the stories are entirely our own creation, sprung from instincts older than memory, woven from our own fears and fascinations. To say no is to honor the creativity of the human mind, its ability to conjure whole civilizations from nothing but rock and silence. In either way, the underground remains a teacher. If yes, it teaches us humility before time's erasures, reminding us how little endures. If no, it teaches us about imagination itself, how the void becomes fertile soil for dream. The question offers meaning whichever way it tilts, like a balanced scale where both sides carry value. Perhaps that is why returning to it now feels so calm. The need for certainty has dissolved, leaving only the rhythm of possibility. It is not a question to be solved, but one to be carried gently, like a stone in the pocket, its weight reminding us of what is hidden and what is seen. The first civilization underground may be real, maybe not, but always meaningful. And in this returning, there is also a kind of closure, though not a final one. For closure here does not mean ending, but rather circling back to the beginning with deeper patience. A spiral, not a line. We stand again at the threshold of speculation, but this time with slower breath, with softer steps, as though the act of asking is itself enough. Soon, other reflections will rise on meaning, on time, on what it is to wonder at all. But before that, let this moment rest here. The question has been returned to, answered in both directions, and left open. That openness is its gift, its lasting echo. Perhaps civilizations lived underground. Perhaps not. Both answers, in their own quiet way, are beautiful. Carrying that thought onward, the question itself begins to dissolve, like chalk lines washed gently by the rain, until what remains is not a demand for certainty, but a soft invitation to wonder. And perhaps that is the true treasure we have been circling all along. Not an answer carved in stone, nor a revelation blazing in sudden clarity, but the quiet, enduring presence of curiosity. The gift of wonder is not about solving the riddle. It is about learning to live with it, to cradle it in the mind as one cradles a smooth river stone, without needing it to change, without needing it to yield more than the comfort of holding it. There is a kind of rest in wonder, a pause from the constant push toward conclusion. To speculate without urgency is to enter a sanctuary where the mind is allowed to breathe slowly. It is the space between thoughts where imagination can stretch its wings, moving lightly through possibilities, not to conquer them, but simply to pass through their open doors. In this way, wonder becomes almost like a kind of sleep itself, an inner drifting where strict boundaries soften, and both science and story share the same quiet lantern light. Imagine again the Earth, vast and ancient, her surface marked by storms and silence. Beneath her crust lie endless layers, stone upon stone, memory upon memory. We might picture, as we have before, the possibility of lives tucked deep into caverns, of voices once echoing in those hollow spaces. And whether those lives were ever real or only imagined, the act of picturing them lets us travel. Wonder carries us across time without the burden of proof, like a river ferrying us from one shore to another in the soft twilight. The philosopher's question, did they exist or did they not, becomes less important than the state of mind it opens. For to hold that question is to acknowledge the hugeness of time, the fragile briefness of human memory, and the vast reach of possibility. And in that acknowledgement lies humility, but also a strange, tender beauty. One does not need the certainty of fossils to feel awe. One does not need carved walls to sense the grandeur of mystery. It is enough to look into the dark and wonder what might have stirred there. Wonder, too, is a form of companionship. It walks with us in silence, never pressing for closure. When we lean against the idea that perhaps something was, perhaps it was not, wonder rests there beside us, reminding us that both paths are meaningful. If there were such an underground civilization, their whispers enrich our imagination. If there were not, then the very fact that we can ask, that we can conceive of them, reveals the vastness of human thought. Either way, we are given a gift. Either way, the night sky seems a little wider, the caves a little deeper, the dream a little more luminous. For you, drifting now, this gift does not require effort. It is not a puzzle to solve, but a candle to sit with. Perhaps you feel it already. The quiet warmth of not knowing, the gentle lift of curiosity resting lightly in the chest. This is the kind of wonder that does not sharpen the mind, but softens it, easing its edges until thoughts no longer rush like hurried footsteps, but flow like the steady tide. When wonder enters, it changes how even the simplest things appear. A pebble on the path seems like a story compressed. A shadow on the wall seems like an echo of something more. Even silence becomes charged, not with fear, but with presence. Wonder does this. It deepens the ordinary, makes every gesture of the world feel slightly luminous, as though existence itself is both fragile and infinite at once. And perhaps this is why speculation can be such a balm. When we allow ourselves to imagine what we cannot prove, we step into a kind of timelessness. We are no longer tethered to the immediate demand for clarity or explanation. Instead, we float within the space between. Just as dreams allow us to wander through landscapes that dissolve at dawn, speculation allows us to explore terrains of thought that do not need to harden into fact. Both offer rest, both offer expansion. The gift of wonder is also the gift of perspective. It reminds us how small we are within the deep expanse of time, yet how extraordinary it is that we can even think about such things. Out of stardust and soil, flesh and breath, arises this fragile consciousness that dares to imagine, that dares to whisper, "What if?" And this whisper echoes across centuries, like the sound of a flute played in a cavern, long after the musician has left. It is tempting to think that the treasure lies in the answer, that if only we could find the proof, the fossil, the unmistakable mark of hand upon stone, then the mystery would resolve, and we would at last hold the truth. But truth, too, is fleeting, shifting as new layers of knowledge are uncovered. The greater gift may be that we can live with the question, turning it gently like a prism, watching its many colors flicker across our thoughts. In that play of colors, the mind rests, enchanted not by possession, but by presence. And so, speculation becomes a kind of meditation. To sit with what we do not know, and to feel comfort rather than fear, is to allow the self to open, to look at the dark cave and say, "Perhaps," and to feel the word as a lullaby, not a threat. In this way, wonder is not a demand for more, but a celebration of what is already here. The capacity to imagine, to dream, to reach into the silence with curiosity instead of despair. If you are drifting now, let this thought rest with you, that wonder itself is enough, that you do not need the certainty of an answer to be at peace, that the very act of wondering is the treasure, the flame that burns softly against the vast dark. And even if your mind circles back again, asking the old question, you can let it rise and fall like a tide, knowing that every question is also a door into spaciousness. Soon, we will continue, moving gently toward the final reflections. But here, in this stillness, allow wonder to linger. Let it settle like dew upon the grass of your thoughts, each drop glistening not because it contains the whole world, but because it reflects it in miniature. This too is a gift, one that asks for nothing but presence, a pause, a breath, a whisper that says, "It is beautiful." Simply to not know, carrying the gift of wonder forward, it becomes easier to see time itself not as a harsh judge, but as something softer, more like a river than a blade. A river does not rage forever, nor does it pause at every stone it meets. It simply moves, slow and steady, carrying with it the silt of ages, the fragments of mountains, the whispers of civilizations. And in that motion, everything finds its place, not lost, but transformed, not erased, but woven into new patterns downstream. Time has often been imagined as a relentless destroyer, stripping away all things, leaving ruins and silence. But perhaps that image is too sharp. Perhaps a gentler one serves us better here. Imagine standing on a quiet riverbank, watching the current slide by. Leaves drift, pebbles tumble, light ripples across the surface. What passes is not gone forever. It becomes part of the flow, entering the great cycle where nothing is wasted, only changed. So too with civilizations, whether underground or above, whether grand or humble, each one eventually leans into the current, carried into memory's broader stream. If there were indeed people who lived beneath the Earth's surface long before the civilizations we know, then they too would have been borne away by this river of time. Their walls crumbled into stone dust, their fires cooled into soot, their voices dissolved into silence. Yet in the way of rivers, traces remain. Sediment settles in new places, shaping new banks, nourishing unseen roots. Even if the markers of their existence are gone, the influence lingers in subtle ways, in stories we half remember, in instincts that stir in the dark, in the endless human drive to imagine what came before. Above ground, the story is the same. Empires rise with shining towers, echo with markets and voices, blaze with banners. But eventually, like the underground cities of Cappadocia, like the salt mines and catacombs, like even the tallest skyscrapers of our own time, all are touched by the slow caress of decay. Walls soften, roofs fall, languages drift beyond comprehension. And yet, just as a river nourishes even as it carries away, time transforms what seems lost into new forms of life. The dust of collapsed temples feeds the soil. The stones of fallen walls become the foundations of new homes. Even absence itself teaches those who come after how fragile and precious the present is. There is a humility in recognizing that nothing endures unchanged. It is easy to cling to the illusion of permanence, to imagine that what we build today will remain forever. But time, with its patient current, reminds us that permanence is not the gift we are given. Instead, we are offered participation, a brief chance to step into the stream, to add our voice, our work, our presence to the flow, before being carried onward like all who came before us. And yet, there is comfort in this too, for if all things pass, then so too do our troubles, our conflicts, our fears. Even the hardest stone is rounded by the river. Even the deepest sorrow is eventually softened by the flow of years. Time, in this way, is not cruel but kind, teaching us the art of letting go. If we think of forgotten civilizations or vanished peoples, or the underground whispers we have followed in this journey, we can think of them not as erased but as returned to the river, their stories joining the chorus that moves ever onward. For you, drifting now, perhaps this is a thought that soothes, to imagine your own life as part of that gentle current, flowing not toward oblivion, but toward transformation. Just as night flows into day, just as seasons turn, just as tides rise and fall, so too does every life, every culture, every moment. Each one dissolves, not into nothing, but into the great continuum, where beginning and ending are only bends in the stream. If we close our eyes, we can almost hear it, the sound of time as water, moving softly through stone corridors, echoing in deep caverns. The walls are smoothed by its touch, the silence made alive by its flow. Civilizations that seemed eternal are like sand castles on a shore, beautiful in their moment, then slowly reclaimed by the tide. But is that not part of their beauty? The very knowledge that they would fade makes their existence all the more luminous. In myth, rivers are often gates, crossings between worlds, paths of memory. The river Lethe in Greek tradition was said to wash away remembrance, so that souls could return anew. Perhaps time itself is such a river. It does not merely carry things away. It allows them to be reborn in different shapes. A forgotten civilization underground might become a legend of hidden people. A vanished empire might become the faint etymology of a word on our tongue. The substance changes, but something endures. Something always flows forward. This perspective lets us rest in acceptance. We do not need to resist the current, nor do we need to grasp desperately at what slips away. To float with the river is enough. To trust that what was carried away is not destroyed but transformed is enough. Wonder teaches us to imagine what might have been. Time teaches us to release what cannot remain. Together, they offer a kind of peace, a way of seeing life not as a frantic defense against loss, but as a gentle participation in an endless flow. Soon, we will return to reflection, to the quiet reassurance that all of this, the speculation, the science, the myth, is not meant to burden, but to lighten. For now, let this image linger. Time as a river, carrying with it not just civilizations and stones, but you too, your dreams, your moments of joy and sorrow. And in that flow, everything is joined, everything is equal, everything is made soft. If you are drifting now, you may let this river carry you, unhurried, unresisting. Its waters are cool, its current steady, its song unbroken. Underground or above, mountain or plain, all things eventually meet here. And as you drift, know that nothing is ever truly lost. It all becomes part of the river, and the river never ends. And from the river's edge, the thought bends inward, toward you, drifting now. It is not only civilizations that dissolve into quiet currents. You too are carried gently, softly, with no demand to struggle, no need to hold tightly. You are safe. You are resting. The story has walked through stone and shadow, through myth and memory. But here it folds back into the simplest truth. You are safe. You are resting, like the caves we imagined. Hidden beneath mountains or plains, sleep itself is such a chamber. Dark, protective, enclosing without threat. A place where the world above grows distant, muffled as though by layers of rock, and where the pulse of your own being steadies into calm rhythm. The body curls as if remembering ancient shelters. The mind drifts as if hearing echoes of forgotten voices. Yet what remains is safety. You are safe. You are resting. It helps sometimes to repeat the truth, the way water repeats its song against the stone. Never hurried, never harsh, only circling back to what matters. You are safe. You are resting. Even as thoughts flicker, they dim into the background. Even as questions linger, they soften into murmurs. The story does not ask for answers now. It only offers reassurance. Sleep is its own underground, a descent not of loss, but of renewal. Each night we step into the cave, close the entrance behind us, and wander in corridors where time bends, where images rearrange, where the waking world loosens its grip. Within that darkness, we are held, the way roots hold earth, the way stone shelters flame. To enter it is to be embraced by quiet. To remain in it is to be restored. Perhaps this is why the image of the underground feels so familiar. A chamber beneath the earth, a sanctuary carved from silence. It is not so different from what happens each night when the mind closes its doors and rests. The surface world continues, yes, but within, in hidden halls, there is peace. You are safe. You are resting. If fears stir, remember the river. If restlessness rises, remember the cavern. Both hold you without judgment. Both remind you of the pattern all life follows. Movement into quiet, quiet into renewal. Just as civilizations fade into memory, just as rivers smooth their stones, just as caves keep their stillness for centuries, so too does your body lean toward rest, toward healing, toward release. You, drifting now, may feel the slow rhythm of breath, as steady as footsteps in a long corridor. Inhale, and the world is drawn close. Exhale and it softens, recedes, slips away. Breath after breath, the surface fades. Breath after breath, you enter the quiet. You are safe. You are resting. And if dreams come, let them. They are only shadows on the cavern wall, shapes of memory and wonder moving in silence. They need no control, no interpretation. They pass like echoes, leaving you untouched. The core remains, the shelter, the quiet, the truth, repeated gently. You are safe. You are resting. Even the deepest cave is warmed by hidden fire. Even the coldest stone remembers the sun. So too, within your rest, warmth remains. The heart beats, steady and sure. A small lantern glowing in the darkness. It does not hurry. It does not fear. It only keeps its rhythm, as faithful as the flow of rivers, as ancient as the stars. You are safe. You are resting. Soon, there will be morning. The surface will return. But not yet. Not now. Now is only for descent, for protection, for the dark chamber where you are held. Imagine the earth itself folding gently around you, not as a weight, but as a blanket. Imagine silence itself breathing slowly beside you, steadying your own breath. Nothing presses you. Nothing asks of you. You are safe. You are resting. The story of hidden civilizations, of whispers in caves, of rivers of time, has been a way of walking you here, to this point where there is nothing more to solve, nothing more to seek, only stillness, only the kindness of letting go. You who have followed may now release the thread. You who have drifted may drift deeper. Let the words fade like torchlight dimming. Let the echoes soften until only silence remains. And within that silence, know that the message stays, steady as a heartbeat, simple as breath. You are safe. You are resting. If thoughts return, the message remains. If dreams stir, the message continues, like a stone inscription worn by time yet still legible, like a river repeating its own song. The truth will wait here for you. You are safe. You are resting. You may picture yourself as the traveler of time we have followed, stepping into the underground chamber not of fear, but of sleep, lying down upon soft earth, the walls holding you, the silence enfolding you, the darkness becoming not emptiness, but protection. A door closes softly, and with it, the world above grows still. You are safe. You are resting. And so, the story ends not with answers, but with reassurance. The civilizations of the past may have vanished. The river of time may continue on. But here, in this moment, your only task is to let go, to drift, to rest. You are safe. You are resting. You are safe. You are resting. You are safe. You are resting. Carrying the thought onward, we come to the final bend in this long river of words, where the current slows and the horizon draws near. You, the traveler of time and thought, have wandered with me through caverns of speculation, through corridors of history, through vast echoes of myth and memory. Now, as the journey finds its resting place, the story itself grows quiet, like a lantern lowered, like footsteps fading into stillness. Traveler, yes, that is what you are. Not bound to one path, not tied to one certainty, but moving gently across landscapes both real and imagined. You have walked beneath stone, across hidden chambers, beside rivers of silence, and through halls of speculation. You have stood at thresholds where answers dissolved, and still you moved onward, unhurried, content to wonder. Such is the gift of being a traveler, not needing to arrive, but simply to walk, to drift, to dream. Now the road bends downward into rest. The map closes, the echoes quiet, and you, traveler, are invited to lay down the pack of thought, the burden of time, and simply close your eyes. There is nothing left to seek, nothing left to hold. The story has circled, as rivers do, and has brought you here, to the quiet chamber of sleep. Sleep well, traveler. Let the underground we imagined become not a place of mystery, but a metaphor of comfort. Picture a chamber carved by silence, its walls holding you safely, its air cool and steady, its darkness as soft as velvet. Here, there is no threat. Here, there is only protection, only quiet, only rest. Sleep well, traveler. If you dream, let the dreams carry you as rivers carry driftwood. Gently, without demand, without struggle. If no dreams come, let the darkness itself be enough. A shelter beyond thought. The world above may continue. The river of time may flow. But here you are untouched, held in the quiet pause between moments. Sleep well, traveler. You are not lost in the underground. You are found in it. You are not forgotten by time. You are embraced by it. Each breath is a soft step deeper into calm. Each exhale is a door closing behind you, sealing the world above in silence. Breath by breath, you descend, not into danger, but into safety. And if tomorrow comes, the surface will open again, bright and new. You will rise from the chamber of sleep, as though from a hidden city, carrying only what matters. The stillness, the rest, the quiet assurance that even in the unknown, you are safe. You are resting. You have walked as a traveler through thought and story. And now you lie as a traveler in time, carried gently forward. Sleep well, traveler. Sleep well, dreamer. Sleep well, seeker of echoes. The stars wait above, the rivers move below, and all of it continues without demand. Your only task now is to close the book, to dim the lantern, to release the thread of thought, and float within silence. You are safe. You are resting. You are safe. You are resting. You are safe. You are resting. And now, traveler, the story bows into silence. The last word dissolves into quiet, and the quiet becomes sleep. Sleep well, traveler. Sleep well. Sleep well.